I wanted to get like a thanks. I wanted to get like a fresh OBS. Last time I tried recording this video, it fucking goddamn crashed, and I had the whole video fucking get deleted. So, I said, yeah, I saw the Drake leaks. Man, Moist Critical's covering it right now. So for YouTube, you guys had to wait for this video to come out, but for Twitch, they got to see the shit right after. So, technically, you guys are seeing it right after too, but whatever. Jeff Epstein. The red. Come on.
From the 6th floor of the building.
Oh my god, what the? Wow, why is this not starting from the beginning?
Just let me know.
Right about here, in Dallas, Texas, American President John F. Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. The accused assassin was a man named Lee Harvey Oswald. After being held in custody for less than 2 days, Oswald himself would meet a violent end. According to a subsequent investigation, Oswald had fired 3 rounds from the Texas schoolbook depository. Police recovered 3 shell casings and a
I remember, chat. This is all alleged.
action rifle from the 6th floor of the building. But the shooting of Oswald sparked immediate suspicions of conspiracy.
Like fucking Christ! Like I know this video is like an hour and a half long, and I'm already going on a tangent, but I fucking hate like on the legal shit when we're talking about stuff like this, and you have to say allegedly. Allegedly, even though fucking there's obvious evidence, like bro, who you trying to fool here? Like we know it was you, Bubba the Clown. Like come on. Like what? Just to not hurt your feelings? Fuck that shit.
Driven most Americans to reject the government's conclusion that Oswald acted alone. The arguments for and against conspiracy take many shapes.
Or in those small situations where some people might actually die. No, the truth gets out.
In this video, I want to zoom in and focus on a very narrow slice of this case. Specifically, the events surrounding the Texas schoolbook depository. What exactly happened inside this building from where the shots that killed the president are believed to have been fired?
Alright, chat, this video is pretty long, so I'm gonna try not to pause it. I'm gonna try and go straight through.
In September of 1963, a young man named Wesley Frazier received a call from an employment agency. There was a potential job opening at the Texas schoolbook depository. On September the 13th, Frazier made his way from Irving, Texas, down to central Dallas. He met with Roy Truly, the superintendent of the building.
My boy Roy. Mr. Roy Gilbert.
Back in Irving, Frazier lived with his older sister, Leanie Randall. A few houses down the street lived a woman named Ruth Payne. On October the 14th, both Randall and Payne had a cup of coffee at the house of a neighbor. Payne brought along a friend and Russian immigrant named Marina Oswald, the wife of Lee Oswald. Marina could barely speak any English.
I'm not gonna lie, Oswald doesn't really sound like Russian like that.
Unemployment.
The subject of Lee looking for work and that he hadn't found work for a week came up while we were having coffee. And Mrs. Randall mentioned that her younger brother, Wesley Frazier, thought they needed another person at the Texas schoolbook depository where Wesley worked.
Payne and Marina returned home, spoke with Roy Truly over the phone, and secured a job interview on behalf of Lee.
My boy Roy.
The following morning,
he looks like Roy from Rick and Morty too.
And began his first day of work on October the 16th. So, an acquaintance with whom Oswald's wife was currently staying had a casual conversation with a neighbor. That neighbor happened to have a brother who recently got employed at the book depository. This prompted his wife to ask the acquaintance to call the superintendent of the building to inquire about any vacancies.
I told Mrs. Payne that to send Oswald down and I would talk to him, that I didn't have anything in mind for him of a permanent nature, but if he was suited, we could possibly use him for a brief time.
The position was
If
not only
he was
temporary, but
suited.
only existed due to a temporary shortage of staff.
It was the end of our fall rush. If it hadn't
The
existed
fall
a week or 2
rush.
weeks longer, or if we had not been using some of our regular boys putting down this
Regular
plywood
boys.
floor, we would not have had any need for Lee Oswald at that time, which is a tragic thing for me to think about.
But it gets even more tragic because Oswald was not the only one to apply for a job.
I might have sent Oswald to work in a warehouse 2 blocks away.
No more Nero is
Oswald and
stressing.
another fellow reported for work on the same
I've been
day,
stuck on this
and
level
I
for
needed
so
one of
fucking
them for
long.
the
It's pissing me
depository
off.
building. I picked
Yeah, dude, that's
Oswald.
how I am on fucking Ready or Not.
If Oswald was somehow
getting
entangled in
PTSD.
a conspiracy, and the aim of that conspiracy was for him to become employed at the book depository, this roundabout sequence of events is a very strange way to go about it.
The Coitons.
As the name implies, the Texas School Book Depository was in the business of selling books. For $1.25 an hour, Oswald's job was to prepare the
$1.25
books
an
for
hour.
shipping. He did so by filling out forms and transporting cartons of books between the upper floors and the first. The building had 3 elevators.
Dude, can you imagine only getting paid $1.25 an hour, bro? To do your job? Like, that is actually insane to me, dude. Like, getting paid $1.25 for something that nowadays, you know, like this guy nowadays, to get those books ready and shit, probably getting paid like somewhere between, I want to say, depending on where you live, like 15 to 17 an hour to do that shit. Like, and then my boy over here is getting paid $1.25, dude. A buckaroonie 25. One ruple and a half a rupe. 1 schmeckel and a half. That's fucking crazy.
2 staircases.
And this was only like a couple of years ago, you know?
In the
Not like
northwest
we're
corner,
talking
1
like,
stairway
you know,
and 2 freight elevators provided access to all 7 floors. A small
you know, some
passenger
fucking
elevator with a front
crazy,
entrance stopped at level 4, while stories
you
1
know,
and 2 were connected by a second flight of stairs.
like, it's not like, you
Lacking a
know,
driver's license, Oswald
these guys
relied
didn't
on
have the
Wesley
tech.
Frazier to carpool between Irving and Dallas every Friday evening and Monday morning. He spent workdays at a rooming house in Dallas while spending the weekends with his wife and daughters in Irving. But on Thursday morning, November the 21st, the day before the assassination, Oswald decided to deviate from this routine.
I was standing there on the first floor getting the orders in, and Lee said, "Could I ride home with you this afternoon?" And I said, "Sure, you know, like I told you.
So that says,
Like I say, anytime you want to go see your wife, that is all right with me." Lee had never gone home in the middle of the week before, so I asked him why, and he stated that he was going home to get some curtain rods for his apartment. I asked if he was going home on Friday as well, and he said no.
Frazier drove Oswald back to Irving, where he arrived unannounced at the household of Ruth Payne. Both Payne and Marina were surprised to see Oswald on a Thursday. They assumed he'd come to make amends with Marina due to an argument they had had a few days before.
Of course they argue.
Did your husband give any reason for coming
You hear
home
this guy,
on
dude?
Thursday?
You fucking hear
He
this
said
guy?
that he was lonely because he hadn't come the preceding weekend and he wanted to make his peace with me.
Was anything said about curtain rods or his taking curtain rods to town the following day?
No, I didn't have any.
He didn't say anything like that.
Dude, what kind of fucking job does this guy have where he's only coming home like in the weekends? Like, what the hell, bro? He said it was strange that you saw him on a Thursday. Like, what? Like, where was this guy staying?
The next day, Oswald said goodbye to his wife and left the Payne residence about 7:15. Atop a dresser in the bedroom, he left behind his wedding ring. Oswald was next seen walking down the street by Lenny Randall, carrying a package. He was soon joined by Frazier, and the two of them took a seat in his car to begin their commute.
When you got in the car, did you say anything to Oswald, or did he say anything to you?
I noticed there was a package lying on the back seat. I didn't pay too much attention, and I said, "What's the package, Lee?" And he said, "Curtain rods." And I said, "Oh yes, you told me you were going to bring some today."
Oh yes,
Not
you told
only
me you
was
were gonna
Oswald
bring
carrying
some
a large
today.
package, but he'd forgotten to bring a lunch bag.
Curtain
When he
rods.
rode with me, I say he always brought lunch, except that one day on November 22nd. He didn't bring his lunch that day. Right when I got in the car, I asked him where was his lunch, and he said he was going to buy his lunch that day.
They arrived in Dallas a few minutes before 8 o'clock.
It's already sus.
Walk together from
Already
the parking lot
suspicious.
to the Book depository. But on this particular Friday, Oswald grabbed his curtain rods and rushed ahead into the building.
Curtain
Working on the ground
rods.
floor, in view of the rear entrance, was their colleague, Jack Doherty.
Curtain rods my ass.
Did you see Oswald come to work that morning?
Yes, when he first came into the door.
Did he have anything in his hands or arms?
Well, not that I could see of.
Fraser and Doherty are the only two people known to have seen Oswald entering the building. Fraser says he was carrying a package. Doherty says he was not. Contradictions like this one will become a recurring theme throughout the rest of this video. We'll take a closer look at the missing curtain rods in a later chapter, but for now, let's stay with Oswald.
The motorcade route.
As the morning progressed, Oswald was seen working as normal. Roy Truly described him as an above-average worker who mostly kept himself. In fact, he was a bit of a mystery to his colleagues.
On the way back and forth between Irving and Dallas, did you talk very much to each other?
No, sir, not very much. He was one of these types that just didn't talk.
I was acquainted with Lee Oswald during the time he was employed at the book depository, but I never did get to know him well. He did not mix with the other employees and did not appear to want to make friends with me or any of the others.
Did you ever speak to Oswald?
Yeah, there's always this fucking current common theme where like every single brother, I want to say, you know what I mean, Nero, every single brother is fucking saying that this guy didn't want to make acquaintances and friends, and then every other guy that isn't a brother fucking is like, yeah, he seemed like a normal guy, he seemed fucking chill and shit, you know what I mean? I'm starting to get a fucking little feeling here that fucking this guy Oswald is a little racy. Might be a little, fuck this guy. He might be a little, I don't know. Yeah, he's starting to kind of grind my gears.
Yes, sir.
Did he ever speak to you?
No, sir.
Holy
He never
fucking
replied to
dog
you.
shit.
No, sir.
Would you say he was unfriendly?
Yes, sir, I would.
But there were exceptions to his reticence, and one of them occurred on this Friday morning. James Jarman was working on the ground floor when he observed Oswald staring at the window facing Elm Street.
Oswald was standing up in the window, and I went to the window also, and he asked me, what were people gathering around the corner for? And I told him that the president was supposed to pass in the morning, and he asked me, did I know that he was coming? And I told him, yes, he'll probably come down Main and turn on Houston, and then back again on Elm. Then he said, oh, I see. And that was all.
It's a brief yet fascinating moment. It almost seems as though Oswald had no idea that Kennedy would pass by the book depository. This was indeed the case for some of his colleagues. Jarman himself had only been made aware of the fact shortly before he spoke with Oswald. There's no doubt that Oswald knew the president was coming to Dallas, but whether he knew the route of the motorcade is much more difficult to prove.
It's a
The route of the
speculation.
motorcade had only been finalized a few days before the visit and hinged upon its destination. Kennedy was supposed to attend a banquet in Dallas, but no one could agree on a venue. It came down to two options: the Trade Mart northwest of downtown or the Women's Building to the east. One of the more vocal proponents of the Trade Mart was Texas Governor John Connolly, and after much back and forth, he finally got his way on November the 14th. Had the Women's Building been selected, the motorcade would have sped through Dealey Plaza, east on Main Street, significantly further away and perpendicular to the book depository. Not to mention that First Lady Jacqueline would have been seated between the building and the president.
And
The
Yo,
selection of the
perpendicular
trademark
is
meant
a
that the motorcade
crazy
would now
word.
head west on Main Street and make these turns through Dealey Plaza to reach the northbound lanes on the freeway. Now, these
Perpendicular?
turns could still have been avoided had the motorcade continued like so,
Like,
and
dicular
not
is a
taken the
crazy ass
freeway.
word in and of
But since the
itself.
freeway was the more scenic and
You
expedient
got
route,
ridiculous.
it was the more
Hey,
attractive choice.
yo.
All of that is to say, the success of the assassination was largely dependent upon the selection of the trademark. It might
Like I said, he's
therefore be
feeling like
tempting
Dick
to
Van
cast
Doe right
suspicion
now.
upon Governor Connolly, but it should be noted that he rode in the
My
presidential
boy said,
limousine
fuck
along with the
Frozone,
Kennedys
I'm Dick
and suffered
Zone.
grave injuries during the shooting. Not only that, but
Nigga
Connolly
got
was
that
actually
domain
opposed to
expansion.
a motorcade and
He got
favored a more
that
direct
Dicko
route
motor.
from the airport to the trademark. A brief
My
trek
boy
that
said,
would have
fucking
bypassed
Yoik
Dealey Plaza altogether.
Tenkai,
He
Decolan.
was unfortunately overruled by
Deco-
Kennedy
Mm-hmm.
himself, who wanted
Decolando.
to see
This
and be
nigga was in
seen
the
by the
anime
people
Dick
of
Man
Dallas.
Wonderland.
Okay, so all that was happening behind the scenes, but as far as
Vinland,
the public was
Dickland.
aware,
Man, they'll
there
be
wasn't even
reading
going to be a
Vinland,
motorcade.
Dickland.
As late as November the 15th, the Dallas Morning News
My
reported
boy
that the
Nero be
motorcade seemed
fucking. My boy Nero
unlikely.
be into Dick Fight
But the
Island.
very next day, the parade was
He
finally
be reading
confirmed.
that shit
Hell.
panel by
While
panel.
the precise route
Hey,
followed by
yo.
maps and detailed
You hear
descriptions was
Dick
not
the Great?
officially disclosed until November the 19th, someone familiar
Nigga,
with
Dicks
Dallas
and
could have
Chicas.
approximated the route a few days in
Beyblade,
advance.
Beyblade, let
That
it
is to say,
rip!
the earliest point a member of the public could have deduced that Kennedy would be driven past the Book Depository was November the 16th, less than a week before the visit. There's a good chance that Oswald saw these articles because he'd been observed reading political columns in the very same newspapers. Furthermore, we know from other aspects of Oswald's life that he was politically inclined.
Well, I have studied Marxist philosophy, yes, sir, and also other...
Look, the thing is that nobody's doubting that Oswald wasn't involved. What we're trying to say is that he wasn't the fucking only one. And if you're trying to tell me that he was the only one involved and that bullet somehow magically quick-scoped fucking 3 people on some wanted shit and curved the bullet, you're pissing on my leg and telling me, you're pissing on my dick and telling me it's raining, bro. Like, I'm sorry.
philosophers.
Pissing on my dick?
Like, you're literally pulling my dick and telling me it's raining, bro.
Pissing on
I
my
would
dick?
definitely say that I am a Marxist. That is
Nigga's
correct.
crazy.
But that does not mean, however, that I'm a communist.
What is the difference between the two?
Well, there's a great deal of difference. Several American parties in several countries are based on Marxism,
Like I
such
said,
as
can you please
Vienna,
stop pissing on my
Gamma.
dick?
Certain countries have characteristics of
crazy.
socialist systems, such
Man,
as
never be loving them golden showers, huh?
These then are the differences
Pissing on
between an
your dick?
outright communist country and countries which adhere to leftist or Marxist principles.
Conversely, a lack of interest in politics is precisely why at least one of
He looked
Oswald's
annoyed
colleagues
having to
remained
answer all these
oblivious to the
questions.
motorcade. So while it's understandable for someone apolitical to be taken off guard by a presidential visit, it makes far less sense for someone like Oswald.
On November 21st, the day before the assassination that you were describing, was there any discussion between you and your husband about President Kennedy's trip or proposed trip to Texas, Dallas, and the Fort Worth area?
I
Like
asked
Dallas
Leo that he
Chingazo.
knew where the president would speak and told him that I would very much like to hear him and to see him. I asked him how this could be done, but he said he didn't know how to do that and didn't enlarge any further on the subject.
Had there ever
This
been...
was also somewhat unusual.
She
his lack
just
of
straight cut
desire
him
to talk
off,
about that
man. I don't
subject
give a
any
fuck
further.
if you're talking.
How did you think it was unusual? Could you explain that?
The fact that he didn't talk a lot about it. He merely said something as an answer and did not have any further comments.
Do you mean by that, usually he would discuss a matter of that kind and show considerable interest?
Yes, of course. He would have told me who would be there and where this would take place.
We'll never know what Oswald was thinking when he spoke with James Jarman shortly before the assassination. But it is worth repeating, though, that Oswald was hired on October the 15th. That's a full month before the motorcade route had been decided, let alone announced to the public.
Damn.
On the morning of November the 22nd, a handful of employees had been assigned to install a new plywood floor on the 6th floor of the book depository. Every once in a while, they would catch a glimpse of Oswald.
I saw Lee Oswald shortly before lunchtime. He was by himself with a piece of paper in his hand. I had nothing to say to him, but some of the other male employees teased him and told him he ought to go get a haircut. Lee Oswald just laughed at this remark.
Shortly before noon, it was time for lunch. For a bit
He
of
just
fun, they decided
heckled
to
at
race
this
the two
remark.
elevators down to ground level. As they began descending, they observed Oswald now standing on the 5th floor. He shouted for them to stop or to close the gate to the elevator upon reaching the 1st floor. Charles Givens then realized he'd forgotten his jacket and cigarettes up on the 6th floor.
His jacket and cigarettes.
About to return to ground level, Givens spotted Oswald approaching.
Lee was coming from the window up front where the shots were fired from.
Did you watch where he walked to?
Well, no, sir. I didn't pay much attention. I was getting ready to get on the elevator, and I say, "Boy, are you going downstairs?"
Boy, you
What
going
did he say to
downstairs?
you?
I say, "It's near lunchtime." And he said, "No, sir. When you get downstairs, close the gate to the elevator." That meant the elevator on the...
I like how the difference of mannerism and how they used to talk back then versus now. Like nowadays, we said, like if we're talking past tense, we'll be like, "Oh yeah, I said it's near lunchtime." He said, "No, sir." But this guy saying, "I say it's near lunchtime," like he said, "I say" instead of "I said." It's kind of odd.
on the west side. You can pull both gates down,
He
and
said
it'll
it's near
close by
lunchtime, I
itself.
say.
What else
Yeah,
did he
he's
say?
like, "I say it's near lunchtime" instead of, I said it, like the guy was like, "So what did you say over there?" He was like, "I say it's near lunchtime" instead of, just like, "I said it's near lunchtime."
That is all. I said, "Okay," and got
Sounds
on the
odd.
elevator.
And with that, Givens became the last person inside the book depository known to have seen Oswald before the assassination. At least, that's the official story. The encounter was fixed at 11:55, more than half an hour before the shooting, but other employees claimed to have seen Oswald in other parts of the building around the same time or even later than Givens. Givens himself provided conflicting accounts. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This encounter notwithstanding, Givens was not the last person to visit the 6th floor. Shortly after Givens had left, Bonnie Williams grabbed his lunch and went upstairs. He sat down
Bonnie
right about
Williams.
here to await the president's arrival.
There's nobody up
Now,
here.
when you were sitting by the window, could you see down towards the southeast corner?
No, sir. I couldn't see anything as I remember there. About the only thing that I could see from there would be the top edge of the window because the boxes were stacked up.
Did you see anyone else up there that day?
No, I did not.
The southeast corner is the location from where the shots that killed the president are believed to have been fired, the so-called sniper's nest.
The
Williams says he
sniper's
was
nest.
alone, but
I like
admits his
that.
view was obstructed
Oh.
by tall stacks of boxes. Meanwhile, down by the main entrance, someone was attempting to gain access to the building.
I met an elderly white man at the entrance of the building who asked me to direct him to a restroom. The man was very old and feeble and could hardly make it up the steps. About 5 minutes later, I saw this man leave the building and enter an old Buick automobile with 3 elderly white women. The
3
Buick then
elderly
drove
white
away.
women.
Did you see him talk to anyone in the building?
No, he went straight out.
This individual was never identified and is the only unknown person known to have entered the book depository before the shooting. After finishing his lunch up on the 6th floor,
The guy
Bonnie
is
Williams
suspicious,
heard
but
voices
not that
of James
suspicious.
Jarman and Harold Norman emanating from the floor below. Feeling a bit lonely, Williams went down to the 5th floor and joined his 2 colleagues. The exact time of Williams' departure is unclear, but it was likely no more than 10 or even 5 minutes before the shooting. On the grounds below, a sea of spectators lined the streets of Elm in Houston. Every once in a while, one of them would glance up at the book depository. Indeed, Jarman, Williams, and Norman were spotted on multiple occasions, leaning out the far east windows on the 5th floor. But movement could also be seen on the floor above them, a floor that, by all accounts, was now supposed to be empty.
Or so you thought.
Awaiting the motorcade by the east curb of Houston was a young, newlywed couple named Arnold and Barbara Rowland. Some 15 minutes before the shooting, Arnold spotted a white man in the
Arnold
westernmost window
Schwarzenegger?
on the 6th floor of the book depository. The man was holding a rifle, his gaze locked at Houston. Despite standing a few meters away from an officer, Arnold chose not to report the gunman.
Did it ever enter your mind that you should go and tell the policeman of this sight or this vision that you had seen?
Really, it didn't.
It never entered your mind?
I never dreamed of anything such as that. I mean, I must honestly say, my opinion was based on movies I have seen, on the attempted assassination of Theodore Roosevelt, and the other one, Franklin Roosevelt. And both of these had Secret Service men up in windows or on top of the buildings with rifles. And this is how my opinion was based, and why it didn't alarm me. Perhaps if I'd been older and had more experience in life, it might have made a difference. It very well could have. Do you ever have reoccurring dreams, sir?
What?
Do you ever have reoccurring dreams?
Yes.
This is a reoccurring dream of mine, sir. All the time. What if I told someone about it? I knew about it enough in advance, and perhaps it could have been prevented. I mean, this is something which shakes me up at times.
If Roland's recollection is accurate, it stands in direct conflict with that of Bonnie Williams, who claimed to have eaten lunch on the same floor at the same time. Williams neither saw nor heard anyone, despite having an unobstructed view down to the southwest corner of the building where Roland claimed to have seen the gunman. A few minutes later, a different spectator named Howard Brennan spotted a white man pacing to and fro the easternmost window on the 6th floor. At 12:30, the presidential limousine emerged from behind the building and began driving north on Houston. As the car made a sharp left turn at Elm, a high school student named Amos Ewens glanced up at the book depository and caught sight of a protruding metal rod.
A protruding metal rod. Oh.
What?
Few realized what had happened. Was it a firecracker, backfiring motorcycle, or presidential salute? People near the Rolands even started laughing, perhaps feeling a bit foolish for being frightened by the ostensibly harmless explosion. Standing by the northwest corner of Elm in Houston was James Worrell. He thought the explosion had come from directly overhead. Sure enough, on one of the upper floors, Worrell could see the barrel of a gun. At that moment, a second explosion echoed through Dealey Plaza. Worrell and Ewens witnessed the recoil and muzzle flash of the rifle in concurrence with the sound. Brennan had yet to realize what was happening. He thought a firecracker had been thrown from the book depository. He looked up, and the man he'd seen pacing only minutes before was now aiming down the sights of a rifle.
Boom! Boom! Up to 3 hours. Oh my god.
Brennan could only recall hearing 2 shots, but his testimony implies he might have heard 3. He confusingly said he saw the gunman fire the last shot, yet denied seeing the discharge of the rifle. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, the rifle was seen by a handful of witnesses as the gunman cautiously withdrew from the window.
The rifle, or what?
The rifle?
Was drawn fairly slowly back into the building. And I saw
The
no one in the window.
the
I
rifle.
didn't see a form in the window.
I could see his hand, you know, the rifle laying across his hand. And I could see his hand sticking out on the trigger part. After he got through.
That shit is funny to me. How the brothers be sounding normal and shit, and like, you know, the white people be sounding like, you know. So I picked it up, and I saw the rifle. Yeah, I picked up the rifle. Like, what the?
He just pulled it back in the window.
But I guess that's just how, you know, shit was back then.
As though he was drawing it back to his side. And
I'm also too forgetting that these guys are in Texas, so they are they
making
do
for
have
another
that
second,
southern.
as though to assure himself that he hit his mark, and then he disappeared.
I guess it's like how fucking they be making fun of us over here in New York. They be saying that we sound like New Yorkers, you know, New Yorker. Everybody be doing the New Yorker fucking goddamn voice. Shit is so annoying.
Ewens nor Worrell saw the face of the gunman and could thus offer little to no information regarding his appearance. Arnold was quite some distance away, yet furnished a basic description of the man he'd seen about a quarter of an hour before the shooting, a description that was quite similar to the one provided by Brennan, who got the best look at the gunman. Taken together, these accounts paint a picture of an assassin on the 6th floor of the book depository, taking aim with a rifle and firing at the president from the sniper's nest. But other accounts leave room for a bit of doubt.
Da, da, da.
As previously mentioned, Arnold Roland spotted a white man with a rifle in the westernmost window on the 6th floor about 12:15. But as late as 5 minutes before the shooting, Arnold observed an elderly black man leaning out the easternmost window on the same floor. He might have confused the 6th floor with the 5th, where James Jarman, Bonnie Williams and Harold Norman did indeed lean out the windows. In fact, they were the only black employees known to have watched the motorcade from a floor above the 1st. Except they could hardly be described as elderly. But then, take a listen to this.
Will you describe with as much particularity as you can what that man looked like?
It seemed to me an elderly black man. That is about all. I didn't pay very much attention to him.
This question was then repeated to Arnold a few minutes later, at which point his answer had dramatically changed.
He was very thin, an elderly gentleman.
Honestly, I could believe that from like a very far distance. Like if you're looking like up a building, you know, you can't exactly see the fucking pores of somebody and all their pimples and shit. So, you know, if you see somebody from a fucking like, you know, like let's say you're in Manhattan and you're in a tall ass skyscraper and you look at the building across from you or like two buildings across and you see somebody in the window and they turn around and they have a mustache and shit, you're probably not gonna be like, oh yeah, that guy's probably like a fucking 22. You're probably gonna assume this guy's like an old geezer or some shit, when in reality he's probably like a fucking 30-year-old, you know, like a 29-year-old with a beard or a mustache. You just assumed that he was fucking old because it was from a great distance and he had facial hair.
Bald or practically bald. Very thin hair if he wasn't bald. Had
You
on a
guys
plaid
can
shirt,
pretty
red
easily
and
pull
green,
tricks on
very
you.
bright color. That is what I remember it.
Can you give us an estimate as to age?
50, possibly 55 or 60.
Can you give us an estimate as to height?
5'8", 5'10", in that neighborhood. He was very slender, very thin.
Can you give us a more definite description as to complexion?
Very dark or fairly dark. Not real dark compared to some black men, but fairly dark. Seemed like his face was either, I can't recall detail, but it was either very wrinkled or marked in some way.
So, in the span of a few minutes, Arnold went from "I didn't pay very much attention" to describing the man's complexion, hair, clothing, age, height, build, and even the blemishes on his face.
Sometimes some people are prone to exaggerate more than others, and without in any way meaning to take away from the testimony of your husband as to what he saw in the building at the time, just from your general experience.
Yeah, that's what I'm
do you
saying,
feel
is
you
this
can rely
fucking
on
guy
everything that your
running.
husband says?
And then went from fucking, yeah, I didn't really see, I didn't really see any details. I don't know. I'm just assuming he was a fucking black guy with fucking an old black guy. 5 minutes later, yeah, he's a fucking black guy. He's got fucking this. He's got a pimple on his left butt cheek. He's 5'6". I smelled the fart coming down from his left butt cheek at fucking 3 o'clock. He's got a fucking 7-inch cock. He's got fucking purple eyes. And he's got fucking big ass ears. He's wearing a turquoise sweater. He's about fucking 5'6", 5'9". He's got big hands. He's got fucking 7-foot size shoe. Like, bro, what are you going on about, dude? You were outside. And this is like a 7-story building, and you're looking up to the 7th floor. What are you going on about, bro? Like it's literally like that fucking meme, dude. Like, what are you talking about?
I can rely on everything anybody says.
Well, this is really an unfair question for me to ask.
Like, what are
anyone
you
about your
actually
husband.
talking
I am not
about?
asking it very correctly,
At
but
times, my husband is prone to exaggerate. Does that answer it?
I think it does. Is there anything else you want to add to that, or not?
Usually, his exaggerations are not concerned with anything other than himself. They're usually to boost his ego. They usually say that he is really smarter than he is, or he's a better salesman than he is, something like that.
As leading as
Wait,
the line
these
of
two are
questioning was,
married and
Barbara
she's
was
a high
not
school
alone in
student?
doubting her husband's credibility. Officials at 2 separate high
What is
schools
this?
attended by Arnold explicitly warned authorities not to trust everything he says. He was characterized as someone who would not hesitate to fabricate a story and not tell the truth regarding any matter.
How's this
Indeed,
guy a
Roland lied
teacher?
or exaggerated
And he's a
on
known
multiple
liar.
occasions when he testified.
Teaching niggas how to
Another
lie,
witness who
obviously.
claimed to have seen a gunman in the Book Paul story was Carolyn Walter. Shortly before the arrival of the motorcade, Walter had seen a man with blonde or
Yeah, but if they
brown
know that
hair
you're a known
in one of
liar,
these
like, how are you
windows
still
on the
employed
4th
there?
or 5th floor. She explicitly ruled out the 6th. It should be noted, however, that during the shooting,
Like
this
apparently the
window was
school
closed
board
and the blinds
warned,
down.
like fucking called in to the FBI and like warned them not to trust this guy because he's a fucking known fabricator and he's a fucking liar, pants on fire, cocks fucking melting off.
While this one, as you
That
already
sounds
know,
crazy.
was occupied by Bob Williams and Harold Norman. In any case, the light-haired man seen by Walter was holding a machine gun, and standing beside him was another man wearing a brown suit. Much like
A
Arnold
machine
Roland,
gun.
Walter
My boy
gunman
whipped
was
out a fucking javelin while he was at it. He pulled up his weapon wheel and he whipped out a fucking a law LMG right out of
That's
his
a
asshole.
foot
And when he
on
was done with that,
ability.
he fucking went back into the fucking spin wheel. And then after only then, he whipped out a fucking Carcano and then he fucking pulled the trigger.
a presidential guard and refrained
No,
from
we're just
reporting the
switching
police.
weapons,
In fact, there's no evidence she told anyone of what she'd seen, not even the colleague with whom she watched the motorcade. In Walter's defense, 2 other witnesses recalled seeing a man with light or light brown hair on the 5th or 6th floor, except they never saw a weapon nor an accomplice. Disagreements regarding the floors were at least in part due to the ground floor lacking visible windows.
How do you know it was the 6th floor? 6th floor rather than the 5th floor?
I went with the FBI and I showed them the window, and I didn't count the bottom floor.
You mean the first time you gave a statement, you didn't count the bottom floor?
That's right.
Another source of confusion was the distinct visual difference between the 7th floor and the ones below.
When you first glance at the building, you're thrown off a little as to the floors because there's a ridge. It almost looks like a structure added onto the top of the building, about 1 story above. So you have to recount.
Not only that, but
so
multiple
you have to
witnesses described the
recount.
6th floor as the 2nd floor from the top. But in the chaos that ensued, it seems the tail end of that sentence was not always recorded.
Sounds like chaos.
Amos Ewens is another curious witness because even though he never saw the gunman's face, he did see the top of his head. Somehow.
What did you see in the building?
I saw a bald spot on this man's head. Trying to look out the window, he had a bald spot on his head. I was looking at the bald spot.
Oswald did not have
My
a
boy
bald
mentioned
spot.
the
He
bald
was
spot
thin a
like
bit in
four
front,
times.
but otherwise had a full head of hair. But the strength of Ewens' account is somewhat diminished by his inability to recall much of anything else.
Could you tell whether he was a black gentleman or a white man?
No, sir.
Couldn't even tell that, but you have described that he had a bald
spot in his head. Yes, sir. I could see the bald spot in his head.
Now,
how do you acknowledge that you see a bald spot but you don't look at what skin the bald spot is?
whether his
What
hair
the
was
hell?
dark or light?
No, sir.
Long after the assassination, 15 years to be precise, a journalist working for the Dallas Morning News tracked down a man named Johnny Powell. Powell had supposedly seen 2 men fiddling with a scope on a rifle in the sniper's nest. He described their complexion as darker than white, but that was about it. Once again, one has to wonder if he confused the gunmen with Jarman, Williams, and Norman on the floor below. I mean, after 15 years of silence, there's no telling how Powell's memory could have been distorted.
Yeah, that's true
A good
too.
example of such distortion is Richard Carr. A few minutes before the shooting, Carr had been
Okay,
standing
that's
roughly
just
here
bullshit,
when
dude.
he
There's no
spotted a man
fucking
on the
way.
7th
Yeah,
floor
I'm
of the
fucking right. My boy
depository,
just wanted attention.
all the way over here.
My boy said, yeah, dude, I activated my Byakugan and I fucking sensed their chakra from 4 fucking blocks away. Or from fucking that block away, dude, or whatever. Like fucking 4 huge ass buildings. Yeah,
He was
right,
white
dude.
and wore a hat, glasses, and sport coat. In the
Get the
immediate
fuck
aftermath
outta
of the
here.
shooting, Carr returned to ground level and caught sight of
My
what
boy
he
thinks
believed to
he's
be the
in
same man,
Uchiha.
now trotting south on Houston. He made a left turn right about here before being picked up by a station wagon. By 1969, however, Carr's story had notably changed. The man with a sport coat had now been standing on the 5th floor, not the 7th. After the shooting, Mr. Sportcoat had emerged from behind the book depository, accompanied by 2 other men. They too had been picked up by a separate station wagon before speeding away. It's unclear how Carr is supposed to have seen all of this, considering what he told the FBI back in '64.
Carr advised that from his location on the steel structure of the new courthouse building, it would have been impossible for him to observe the lower floors and entrance of the book depository, and that from his position he could only see the top floor and the roof.
Damn.
In Carr's defense, James Worrell had seen a man emerge from the rear entrance of the book depository about 3 minutes after the shooting. This man also wore a sport coat and headed south on Houston. Except the man seen by Carr was kinda stocky and wore a hat, while the man seen by Worrell had a slender build and was hatless. Besides, anyone connected with the shooting, leaving via the rear entrance, would surely have headed north, not towards the scene of the crime. As if that was not enough, two other witnesses, James Romack and George Rackley, stood roughly here for several minutes after the shooting. Both of them paid special attention to the rear entrance of the building.
Mr. Romack stated that from the time he heard the shots, he had looked toward the book depository and had, under his immediate observation, the loading dock and the back door. He stated he is positive that no one came out of this door or out of the loading dock doors.
Could you see the back door of the Texas School Book Depository?
Yes.
Were you looking towards that direction?
Yes, sir.
About how long did you keep your eyes fixed over there?
Oh, I would say 5 minutes anyhow. Probably 10. I was looking up that way at all times.
Did you see any people leave the Texas School Book Depository by way of the rear exit?
No, sir.
Did you see any people running north on Houston Street?
No, sir.
Unfortunately, conflicting accounts were not limited to the book
fucking
depository.
people just coming out the exit. That's
In the
hilarious.
vicinity of Dealey Plaza, nothing was as disputed as the number and origin of the gunshots.
Governor Conley was holding his stomach. And the shots were almost simultaneously, weren't they?
Yeah, right.
Yes, sir. They were probably 10 seconds apart. Do you know who fired the third shot?
But we couldn't even count the amount of fucking shots fired. That's actually crazy.
We hit, my family hit the ground, and I don't recall a third shot. I just couldn't, I'm not certain of that. I do know I heard 2 shots.
Yeah, I heard 3. I know
You
there were
heard
3.
Well,
yeah, I said to Jerry after the second shot. I
Yeah, well, I heard 3.
No one knows exactly how many spectators were in or near Dealey Plaza at the time of the assassination. Well over 200 were at some point questioned by a combination of authorities, journalists and others. Attempts have been made to consolidate the various accounts, and it's clear from all such attempts that the majority of witnesses heard 3 shots. What's a bit less clear is the source of the explosions. The gunman was either placed in the vicinity of the book depository, marked here in red, or an area west of the building, marked in green, known as the grassy knoll. But as you can see from these pie charts, the assessment of earwitness testimony is highly susceptible to bias. It's a surprisingly subjective exercise that can lead to widely different results. Nevertheless, there were a substantial number of witnesses who pointed to the grassy knoll located roughly here, and
yes, the grassy knoll.
To give you some examples, August Campbell was standing near the front entrance of the book depository, yet believed the shot to come from the grassy knoll. Meanwhile, Marilyn Sitzman was standing on the grassy knoll, yet believed the shots had come from the book depository. Standing beside Campbell was a woman named Geraldine Reed, who believed the shots had come from the book depository.
So there's obviously a fucking easy explanation for like this specific situation. It's like when you're fucking playing an online like shooter game. It's like that same concept when you're fucking, you know, your teammates are trying to give you callouts, but they hear something somewhere else and you're hearing something somewhere else. But it's all coming from the same place.
The curb in front of Sitzman was William Newman, who believed the shots had come from the grassy knoll. One might therefore conclude that there must have been 2 assassins, one in the book depository and one on the grassy knoll. Indeed, countless authors and even a congressional investigation have done precisely that. Now, the scope of this video is not nearly exhaustive enough for me to attempt any conclusions regarding a second gunman, but I do want to leave you with this. You might have seen these unlabeled blue slices before. Well, that's how many witnesses heard gunshots coming from multiple directions. That is to say, next to no one did. All the shots came either from the east or west, not both.
Mr. Campbell believed the noise came from away from the book depository.
That is weird.
This illusion, he explained, may have been due to the sound bouncing off the building and other objects in the vicinity.
August Campbell was far from alone in being deceived by the pronounced echoes of the gunshots.
Where did the noises or shots sound to you like they came from?
It was hard to tell because they had an echo, you know. There was actually 2 explosions with each one. There was the shot and then the echo from it. So it was hard to tell. There was too much reverberation. There was an echo which gave me a sound all over. In other words, that square is it had a sound all over. The sounds came either from up against the school depository building or near the mouth of the triple underpass. I had worked in this watchtower for some 10 or 12 years and was there during the time they were renovating the school depository building, and had noticed at that time the similarity of sounds occurring in either of those two locations. There's a reverberation which takes place from either location.
This auditory illusion was not a fluke. Not only did the building surrounding Dealey Plaza act as an echo chamber, but even experienced hunters can struggle to pinpoint the number and origin of gunshots by sound alone. Here's a quote from a book on that very topic, published a few years before the assassination.
Little credence should be put in what anyone says about a shot or even the number of shots. These things coming upon a person suddenly are generally extremely inaccurately recorded in their memory. One of the authors asked one deer hunter last fall how many shots another hunter less than 100 yards away had fired. The answer was 5. Actually, only 2 shots were fired.
Employees in the book depository were no less confused about the gunshots than the spectators outside. To give you some examples, on the first floor, Eddie Piper heard 3 shots that appeared to come from inside the building. On the third floor, Edna Case and Sandra Ellison heard nothing. Meanwhile, Stephen Wilson on the same floor heard 3 shots, came from the west. On the fourth floor, Elsie Dorman, multiple shots came from this building across the street. Victoria Adams, 3 shots from the west. Mary Hollis, 3 shots inside the building. But some employees not only heard the shots, but could literally feel the explosions shake the building.
Could you tell where the shots were coming from?
Yes, sir. They came from inside the building.
How do you know
It's like
that?
an explosion.
The building vibrated from the result of the explosion coming in.
Did you
Motherfuckers
know
thought
they
that it
were
was like
shots
an earthquake.
Yes, sir. They sounded almost like cannon shots. They were so terrific.
Much like Geneva Hine on the second floor, Bonnie Williams could feel the explosions up on the 5th. It sounded to Williams as though the shots had been fired from the floor above. His colleague James Jarman initially thought the shots had come from somewhere below, but then changed his mind and agreed with Williams. Harold Norman, meanwhile, heard far more than gunshots.
Just after the president passed by, I heard a shot. And several seconds later, I heard 2 more shots. I knew that the shots had come from directly above me, and I could hear the expended cartridges fall to the floor. I could also hear the bolt action of the rifle.
The explosions
So you
shook the
the
building,
bolt
and a piece of
action.
loose plaster or dirt was dislodged from the ledge above and struck Williams in the head. Meanwhile, spectators on the streets below could see them leaning out the windows, looking up at the 6th floor.
I just looked straight up ahead of me, which would have been looking at the school book depository, and I noticed 2 black men in a window,
Here we
standing
go.
in the seat directly above them, and my eyes followed right up to the window above them, and I saw the rifle, or what looked like a rifle.
Frightened and somewhat entranced by the pandemonium outside, the 3 men remained on the 5th floor for several minutes. Meanwhile, the apparent assassin upstairs
The
was running a race
pandemonium.
against time.
Did you hear anything upstairs at all?
No, sir. I didn't hear anything.
Any footsteps?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Probably. The reason we didn't hear anything is because, after the shots, we were running too. And that was making a lot
So
of noise.
after the shocks.
Why didn't you go up to the 6th floor?
I really don't know. We just never did think about it.
So they couldn't tell you,
Maybe
boss.
because we were frightened.
When the shooting began, motorcycle policeman Marion Baker had just made a right turn from Main Street to Houston. Baker recognized the explosions as gunfire and could see a flock of pigeons fluttering above 2 buildings further up ahead. Baker made a split-second decision and headed for the book depository. Once inside, he was greeted by Roy Truly.
Roy,
Truly
Mr.
directed Baker
Roy
to the
Truly.
elevators, but neither was available. He pressed the button while shouting up the elevator shaft for someone upstairs to close the gate.
Yo, that must honestly be scary as fucking like a company owner, like a store owner, like one of your employees just killed the president, dude. Now they're all swarming your fucking Your store? Sheesh.
Instead, they began running up the stairs.
Some narrow shit.
What is this nigga talking about?
Mr. Truly was ahead of me. As
Make
he'd
this
come
nigga
out,
go
I was
stupid.
kind of scanning, you know, the rooms, and I caught a glimpse of this man walking away from this. I happened to see him through this window in this door. I don't know how come I saw him, but I had a glimpse of him coming down there.
Where was he coming from? Do you know?
No, sir. All I seen of him was a glimpse of him go away from me.
What did you do?
I hollered at him at that time.
I said I hollered.
Come here. He turned and walked right straight back to me.
I hollered at cousin.
I didn't get anything out of him. Mr. Truly had come up to my side here, and I turned to Mr. Truly and I says, "Do you know this man? Does he work here?" And he said, "Yes." And I turned immediately and went on out up the stairs.
The man whom Baker and Truly encountered in the second-floor lunchroom was none other than Lee Harvey Oswald. The encounter was brief, lasting no more than 30 seconds. Oswald appeared calm and failed to evoke suspicion, so Truly and Baker left him in the lunchroom and proceeded up the stairs. They spent some time searching the roof, but there was no assassin to be found. Down by the main entrance, Geraldine Reed was still trying to process what had just occurred. She decided to return to her office on the second floor of the building.
Sorry guys, I'm just packing a quick
About
bomb
2 minutes after the shooting, Reed became the last known person to have seen Oswald inside the book depository.
I kept walking and I looked up and Oswald was coming in the back door of the office. I met him by the time I passed my desk by several feet, and I told him, I said, "Oh, the president has been shot."
I told him. I says.
He mumbled something to me. I kept walking. He did too. I didn't pay any attention to what he said because I had no thoughts of him having any connection with the shooting at all, because he was very calm.
Oswald is then presumed to have taken the front stairs and, on his way out the main entrance, encountered someone looking for a phone. There are at least 2 candidates for who this person might have been, but Oswald seems to have pointed out the phone inside the building before blending into the chaos outside. He was next observed boarding a bus a few blocks east of Elm. Nearly 4 months after the assassination, Truly and Baker participated in a crude reconstruction of the shooting to time their movements. The experiment was repeated twice. On the first attempt, it took them 1 minute and 30 seconds to reach the second floor lunchroom. Then, 1 minute and 15 seconds. These time trials were primarily conducted to determine whether Oswald could have fired the shots from the 6th floor and still made it down to the second in time for his encounter with Truly and Baker. After all, if there wasn't enough time, Oswald could not have been the assassin. A bunch of different routes were tested, and while Oswald could theoretically have taken one of the elevators or even the fire escape, in practice, there wasn't enough time.
You do not think the assassin used any of the elevators at any time to get from the 6th to the 2nd floor?
You mean after the shooting? No, sir. He just could not, because those elevators, I saw myself, were both on the 5th floor. They were both even.
The only other means of descent was the stairway. A stand-in for the gunman trotted down from the 6th floor to the 2nd in 1 minute and 18 seconds. Then, at a slightly faster
boy said,
pace,
"You've
1
seen
minute
nothing."
and 14 seconds. There was just enough time. It's therefore possible that Oswald stopped on the 2nd floor, perhaps upon hearing Truly shouting up the elevator shaft, and attempted to hide in the lunchroom mere seconds ahead of Truly and Baker's arrival. But it's not quite that simple, because Oswald is not the only person using the stairway to escape the building.
Respect.
As previously mentioned, Victoria Adams watched the motorcade from an office on the 4th floor of the book depository. Within 30 seconds of the shooting, Adams ran down the stairs to the 1st floor along with her colleague, Sandra Stiles.
Sandra Stiles, dude. The ancestor of Harry Styles.
From the stairway?
Yes, sir. Mr. William Shelley and Billy Lovelady.
Now, what did you do after you encountered Mr. Shelley and Mr. Lovelady?
That dude fucking narrow. That's what I'm saying.
Do you remember what they said?
No. Then what
did you do?
I
What is
proceeded
wrong
out
with
to the
this
Houston
nigga?
Star.
There are two
That's what you
significant
sound
problems
like,
with
dude.
Adams' account. The first being that
Oh
she and Styles
God,
supposedly left
this
the fourth
nigga,
floor within 30
full
seconds of the
spam.
shooting and then ran down the stairs to the first. This would place them in approximate sync with Oswald
Yeah, but
descending
what
from the
time is
6th
it?
floor to the
Ah.
I'm trying
second.
to feed this hot
Now,
nigga
as
out
you were
for
running down the
fucking
stairs, did you encounter anyone?
Not during the actual running down the stairs.
Hear anyone mention stairs?
No, sir.
Well,
he
perhaps
just
what
hit the
Oswald
time
saw a
is
weed
it?
and
few flights
started
above,
on
and
sped.
his footsteps were drowned
You
out
hear
by
this
their
kid?
own. This would mean that Styles and Adams
No, you're
left the
not
I know
fourth
smoking
it's
no
floor
weed,
okay.
within
bro. You're
seconds
smoking
ahead
the
of
cock,
Oswald's
dude.
arrival,
I
reached the
know
ground
I
floor mere
said
seconds ahead
hey.
of Roy Truly and
Yeah,
many
I
of
know
the
you
Baker's
know you're
assault,
smoking the
before
cock.
encountering William
You don't
Shelley
gotta be
and Billy
retarded
Lovelady
forever,
right
Austin,
about
I
here.
promise.
You hear this
But
kid?
this is when problem number 2 makes an entrance. When the president was shot, Shelley and Lovelady stood on the front steps of the book depository. They spent several minutes roaming about outside before returning to the building.
Man, this
And
man
that's the
never be
problem.
having
How did Styles
Asperger's.
and Adams encounter Shelley and Lovelady within seconds of the shooting if it took them several minutes to return to the building?
Who did you see on the first floor after returning to the book depository?
I saw a girl, but I wouldn't swear to it. It's Vicky.
What is her full name?
Vicky
wouldn't know.
Vale.
Vicky Adams?
I believe so.
Would you say it was Vicky you saw?
I couldn't swear.
Where was the girl?
I don't remember what place she was, but I remember seeing a girl and she was talking to Shelley or saw Shelley or something.
Shelley could recall no such incident.
Shelley.
Presuming that Lovelady was correct and Shelley had a lapse of memory, it's possible their encounter with Styles and Adams occurred minutes rather than seconds after the shooting. After all, Adams could have been mistaken. This scenario implies that Oswald made his escape, Truly and Baker went upstairs, and then several minutes later, Styles and Adams left the building. But it's not quite that simple. Watching the motorcade alongside Styles and Adams was their supervisor, Dorothy Garner.
Miss Garner stated this morning that after Miss Adams went downstairs, Miss Garner, saw Mr. Truly and the policeman come up.
Not only does this account corroborate that of Adams, meaning they left within seconds, not minutes, but it implies that Garner was in a position to observe the stairway from somewhere on the fourth floor. In spite of this, Garner made no mention of seeing Oswald scampering down the stairs between Styles
What
and
if one of
Adams'
them did
departure
see them and just
Truly
forgot
Baker's
or
arrival.
forgot to mention it?
What makes this
Or didn't
conflict so
realize that they
difficult to
saw it.
resolve is that neither Styles nor Garner were called to testify. We have but a few brief statements of what they witnessed. All we know about Sandra Styles is that she went down the stairs with Adams. Did it happen within
Dude,
seconds of the
Sandra
shooting?
Styles
We don't know.
looks so fucking American. It's not even funny, dude. Like when you think of like the yeah, she. Oh no, bro. Like when you think of like the classic American housewife, like the classic American, like civilian female. This is what you think of, is her.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if
Did she
you're
see
going
or
around
hear
that
anyone
era
else
and
while
time.
running down the
Hell yeah.
stairs? We don't know. Did she encounter Shelley and Lovelady on the first floor? We don't know. Authorities appear to have presumed Adams unreliable and then ignored the witnesses who could have easily refuted or confirmed that presumption. A simple reenactment like the one granted Truly and Baker could have gone a long way to resolve this issue. But that never happened. Many decades after the assassination, author Barry Ernest was able to track down Sandra Styles, Dorothy Garner, and Victoria Adams. Styles confirmed that she and Adams left the window within seconds of the shooting, but she doesn't explicitly say they left the fourth floor within seconds. In any case, as they moved quickly down the stairs, she heard no footfall apart from their own. Garner confirmed she never witnessed the descent of Oswald, despite seeing Truly and Baker heading upstairs. Adams went a bit further and accused investigators of tampering with their testimony.
I'm beginning to wonder if the Shelley and Lovelady encounter was inserted into my testimony later. I remember saying to a fairly big black man inside the building, right near the loading dock, right after I got down the stairs, that I thought the president may have been shot.
Sandra Styles apparently told Ernest something similar.
A few people were milling around on the first floor. One was a black man. Shelley and Lovelady were definitely not on the first floor when we got there.
The only black employees who could have possibly made it to the rear stairway in time were Carl Jones, Roy Lewis, Eddie Piper, and Troy West. What you see here are their approximate positions at the time of the shooting, but during the seconds and minutes that followed, only Piper is known to have paid any attention to the stairs in the back. As soon as the shooting began, Piper crossed the first floor to get a better view of a clock. He remained in roughly this location until he observed Truly and Baker running up the stairs.
Had anybody come down the steps before Truly and Baker went up the steps?
No, sir.
Did Vicky Adams come down before Truly and Baker went up the steps?
No, sir. No, sir. She didn't do it.
Remember James Romack and George
No,
Rackley?
sir. She didn't do it.
I wouldn't blame you if you don't. There's like 100 different names to keep track of, but they were the ones who failed to spot anyone leaving the book depository via the rear
You hear
entrance
this guy?
for several minutes after the shooting. Well, the thing is, according to both Stiles and Adams, they left the book depository via the rear entrance upon reaching the first floor. So if Romack and Rackley are to be believed, then once again, the descent of Stiles and Adams must have taken place minutes rather than seconds after the shooting. Not only that, but when Sandra Stiles was contacted by another researcher, she apparently expressed great uncertainty regarding the stairwell descent and thought it might in fact have occurred a couple of minutes after the shooting.
So she doesn't know nothing about nothing.
I don't know what to make of all this. The conspiracy crowd will, of course, amplify the more suspicious elements, while those who support the official narrative will focus on that which discredits Adams. But ultimately, we don't know the exact timeline of events. It's difficult enough to pin down the minute-by-minute chronology. Once you get down to seconds, there's a lot of guesswork at play. The time trials by Truly and Baker gives us a rough estimate, but that's not cast in stone. They could have easily been a bit faster,
So
a
that's
bit
not
slower.
cast in
So too could
stone.
have Shelley, Lovelady, Garner, Stiles, Adams, and Oswald.
Would you say that the reconstruction that we did on March the 20th was a minimum or a maximum time?
Oh, I would say that would be the minimum time. We did everything that I did that day, and this would be the minimum time, because I'm sure that it took me a little longer.
I must also mention that we don't know much about the layout of the fourth floor beyond this crude schematic. If the other floors are any indication, much of this space was occupied by bookshelves and tall stacks of boxes. This is significant because Dorothy Garner never actually saw Stiles and Adams enter the stairway. She only heard footsteps of what she presumed to be them running down the stairs.
Oh yeah? So she didn't even actually see them. So she's a fucking liar, dude. She's a conspiracy theory. She is
Following
conspiracy.
a quick sweep of the roof, Roy
She
Truly and Mary
plot
Baker
twist, she's in
returned to the
on
ground
it.
floor of the book depository.
Oh my
What did you
god,
do
what's
when you
wrong
got
with
back
this
to the first
nigga?
floor?
Oh,
What
what's
did
good
you
with you,
see?
cuz?
When I got back to the first floor,
Oh,
at
nigga,
first I
moaning
didn't
and
see
shit.
anything except
Yeah, that ass,
officers
like, why are you
running
moaning,
around,
bro?
reporters in the place. There was a regular madhouse.
Look, are you good
Have
now?
they sealed off the building yet? Do you know?
Hmm?
I am
You
sure
hear
they
this guy?
had.
Then what?
Then, in a few
My boy
minutes,
sound like he's
it could have
fucking
been
Good Luck
moments
Charlie.
or minutes at a
Nah,
time like
delete
that,
this.
I noticed some of my boys were over in the west corner of the shipping department, and there were several officers over there taking their names and addresses and so forth. I noticed that Lee Oswald was not among these boys.
Oswald was
Was
not
it
the
among these
only
boys?
absentee, but he was the only one whom Truly knew for a fact had left the building after the shooting. Meanwhile, on the sixth floor,
That's
a
not
stack of
sus,
boxes
only
in the
after the
southeast
shooting,
corner
not fucking
attracted the
before.
attention of Deputy Luke Mooney.
I went straight across to the southeast corner of the building, and I saw these high boxes. And the minute I squeezed between these two stacks of boxes, I had to turn myself sideways to get in there. That is when I saw the expended shells, and the boxes that were stacked up looked to be a rest for the weapon.
2 windows west of the sniper's nest, authorities found a bottle of Dr. Pepper and some chicken bones, leftovers from the lunch eaten by Barney Williams shortly before the assassination. But according to some officers, including Mooney, remains of a similar meal were also found in the sniper's nest.
Does this photograph show any place where you saw the chicken bone?
If I recall correctly, the chicken bone could have been laying on this box, or it might have been laying on this box right here. There was one of them partially eaten, and there was a little small paper poke.
By poke, you mean a paper sack?
Right. The assassin could just maybe take one step and lay it over there, if he was the one that put it there.
In spite of this, no such items were ever photographed. Apart from the sack of chicken bones found here, there are no records of leftovers being recovered from anywhere else near the sniper's nest.
Now, did you see a chicken bone over near the boxes in the southeast corner?
I don't believe there was one there.
you didn't see any. One witness, a deputy
didn't
sheriff
see any
named
chicken
Luke Mooney,
fingers.
said he found a piece of chicken partly eaten on top
Chicken
of one
fingers
of
with the red
boxes.
lobster.
Did
Chicken
you
fingers
see
with the red
anything like
lobster.
that?
No,
Was anything like that called to your attention?
I can't recall anything like that.
But it wasn't just
Said I
the
do
chicken bones.
declare.
There were similar disagreements regarding the 3 cartridge cases. According to Mooney, Dallas Police Captain William Fritz tampered with the evidence.
Are those the empty shells you found?
Yes, sir.
Now, will you take this marker and encircle the shells?
All right.
They were turned over to Captain Fritz?
Yes, sir. He was the first officer that picked him up, as far as I know, because I stood there and watched him go over and pick them up and look at them.
Is this the position of the cartridges, as shown in this photograph, as you saw them?
Yes, sir. That is just about the way they were laying. To the best of my knowledge, I do know there was one further away, and these other 2 were relatively close to each other on this particular area. But these cartridges, this one and this one, looks like they are further apart than they actually was.
Now, I didn't quite understand. Did you say that it was your memory that A and B were not that close together?
Just from my memory, it seems that this cartridge ought to have been over this way a little further.
You mean the B cartridge should be closer to the C?
Closer
Yeah,
to the
you
C.
fucking bimbo,
Yes,
that's what I'm
sir.
saying.
Mooney did not explicitly state, but strongly implied that Captain Fritz moved at least one of the cartridge cases.
I mean, he
before
didn't
they were
imply, he
photographed.
literally said he picked it up. What do
According
you
to
mean?
Fritz, he did everything by the
Man is saying he
I
allegedly
told him
said
not
this,
to move the cartridges,
when there's
not to
literally a
touch
fucking
anything
recording
till
of
we
him
get the
saying
crime
it.
lab to take pictures of them, just as they were lying there.
Like, what do you
And I left
mean?
an officer assigned there to see that that was done. And the crime lab came almost immediately and took pictures and dusted the shells for prints.
Amidst the swarm of officers canvassing the 6th
They
floor
dusted
was a young
Nero's chin
journalist
off for
by the name of
prints.
Thomas Ollier. Ollier was equipped with a camera and actually filmed much of the frantic search effort. About 3 decades later, Ollier made some rather startling claims
Bro,
that
why?
were largely
What?
consistent with, but also expanded upon those made by Mooney.
After filming the casings, I asked Captain Fritz, who was standing at my side, if I could go behind the barricade and get a close-up shot of the casings. He told me that it would be better if I got my shots from outside the barricade. He then rounded the pile of boxes and entered the enclosure. This was the first time anybody walked between the barricade and the windows. Fritz then walked to the casings, picked them up, and held them in his hand over the top of the boxes for me to get a close-up shot of the evidence.
Oh,
I filmed
yeah?
about 8 seconds of a close-up shot of the shell casings in Captain Fritz's hand.
And it's mysteriously
These
gone because
alleged
it's
portions
incriminating the
of
guy
Ollier's
for
film
actually
had never
tampering
surfaced.
with it.
Preservation took a back seat while the film was being prepared for broadcast.
Yeah, because
they
Portions
knew
of
if
the
they
film
let
were
that shit
carelessly
fucking
chopped
run,
up and
it would be
discarded,
incriminating that
and
guy for
fragmentary
actually
clips
tampering
are
with it.
all
That's
that
evidence of
remains
him
today.
actually
In
tampering
any
with
case,
it.
after
Can't have
supposedly
that.
filming the casings in the hand of Captain Fritz, Ollier recalled how they were deceitfully returned to the floor.
Over 30 minutes later, Captain Fritz reached into his pocket and handed the casings to Detective Robert Studebaker. Studebaker never saw the original placement of the casings, so he tossed them on the floor
Of
and
course,
photographed
yeah. Of course.
To counterbalance
It's
these
not like, you
allegations of
know,
foul
this
play,
case
I
is
must also
pertaining to the
mention that there were
President
those
of the
who found
United
nothing amiss
States, you
about the
know.
cartridge cases.
Did you see a picture taken of the holes?
Yes, sir.
When the picture was taken, were the holes in the same position as when you had first seen them?
Yes, sir. They were.
Even Mooney sort of agreed that the casings had not been moved, immediately after explaining that they had been moved. In the testimony we heard a few minutes ago,
My
Mooney
boy was probably
shown this
threatened.
photograph. He then examined this one, taken from a different angle, before being shown this one. Now, these two are just differently cropped copies of the same photograph.
I have another picture. Here is a picture taken, also from another angle. Does that show the cartridges?
Yes, sir.
Now, compare that with the other photograph.
Yes, sir.
Is that about the way it looked?
Yes, sir. That is right. It sure is.
That doesn't really gel with the
Yes,
casings
sir.
supposedly being
Sure
picked up
it
and
is.
haphazardly tossed back on the floor, as Thomas Ollier would claim decades later. While there are question marks surrounding the chicken bones and cartridge cases, there can be no doubt that some of the boxes in the sniper's nest were moved prior to being photographed.
Do you have any pictures of the boxes near the window before they were moved, other than those you have showed me?
Just these two.
Then you don't have any pictures taken of the boxes before they were moved?
No.
Now, I will show you another picture.
Why
Was that
wouldn't
taken by
you
you?
do that?
Yes.
Does that show the position of the boxes before or after they were moved?
That's after they were dusted. There's fingerprint dust on every box.
And they were not in that position then when you first saw them?
No.
Negatory.
Several minutes after the sniper's nest was discovered, a bolt-action rifle was found between two rows of boxes near the stairway. Now, there was some initial confusion regarding its make and model. Some thought it looked like a Mauser, but upon closer inspection, it was identified as an Italian Carcano.
A
The officer who
Mauser.
misidentified the rifle later explained that he did
An
so
Italian
at a glance.
Carcano.
However, over a decade after the assassination in 1976, a former deputy sheriff by the name of Roger Craig claimed to have seen the marking 7.65 Mauser stamped right on the barrel of the rifle. To some, this is evidence that a Mauser was in fact discovered at the 6th floor before being swapped for a Carcano. But Craig was the only person to make this specific claim,
My boy's
did
name is
so many
Craig.
years after the assassination, and after telling a journalist the following.
Did you handle that rifle on the 6th floor?
Yes, I did. I couldn't give its name because I don't know foreign rifles. I know it was foreign made, and you loaded it downward into a built-in clip. But there was another rifle, a Mauser, found up on the roof of the depository that afternoon.
There were no reports of a Mauser being found on the roof either. Besides, the
So the
only rifle
Mauser.
seen in the film taken by Thomas Ollier is unmistakably a Carcano. Unique markings on the cartridge cases would later prove that this was indeed the rifle from which all three had been fired. Before the day was over, the rifle had been traced to a company in Chicago, Illinois. The company had sold the rifle to someone named A. Hiddell and shipped it to a post office box in Dallas in early 1963. Alec James Hiddell was a pseudonym known to have been used by Oswald. So there was now a direct link between the shells, the rifle, and Oswald. Not only that, but Oswald's prints were lifted from both the rifle and boxes in the sniper's nest. Apart from the spent shells and the rifle, authorities discovered one other key piece of evidence.
Did you find anything else up in the southeast corner of the 6th floor?
Yes, sir. We found this brown paper sack, or case.
No,
It
brown
was made
paper
out of heavy
sack.
wrapping paper. Actually, it looks similar to the paper that those books in the building was wrapped in. It was just a long, narrow paper bag.
The bag was alleged to have been found here, yet this space is suspiciously empty and all the crime scene
So
photographs.
don't be suspicious.
How
Don't
long
be
was the paper
suspicious.
bag, approximately?
I don't know. I picked it up and dusted it for prints, and they took it down there and sent it to Washington. And that's the last I'd seen of it, and I don't know.
Did you take a picture of it before you picked it up?
No.
Does that sack show in any of the pictures you took?
No, it doesn't show in any of the pictures.
Detective Robert Studebaker, who had been working as a forensic assistant for less than 2 months, neglected to explain why he never photographed the bag. In Studebaker's defense, no one was on the lookout for a brown paper bag. Assassin, sure, rifle, casings, absolutely, but some debris in a dark-lit corner of the room. It wasn't until the bag was picked up and inspected that its significance became apparent.
Do you remember anything about what the sack looked like?
Well, it was assumed at the time that it was the sack that the rifle was wrapped up in when it was brought into the building, and it appeared that it could have been used for that.
Now, as you may recall, Wesley Frazier drove Oswald back to Irving on November 21st to pick up some curtain rods. The following morning, Oswald was seen carrying a package by both Frazier and his sister, Linnie Randall. According to Frazier, Oswald told him the package contained curtain rods which he then brought back to Dallas. But you may also recall that Jack Dougherty denied seeing such a package.
Did you see Oswald
It
come to work
contained
that morning?
jerkin rods.
Yes, when he first came into the door.
Did he have anything in his hands or arms?
Well, not that I could see it.
The thing is, Dougherty was not a reliable witness. When questioned by the FBI and Secret Service, he appeared very confused about times and places.
Of course,
he required
yeah.
assistance from his father due to considerable difficulty in coordinating his
So why the
mental
fuck are you
faculties with his
asking him?
speech. While Dougherty denied having such issues,
He's
his
already like
testimony is
a
nonetheless
not
riddled with
reliable
contradictions.
source
Wait
of
a minute,
information
did you
at
go
that
to
point.
lunch?
Well, I went back downstairs to eat lunch. Yes, sir.
What time?
It's like trying to fucking ask
Oh,
no
it
for
was 12
information. Yo, you're not gonna get
Wait
nowhere.
a minute. Did you hear the shots before or after your lunch?
Before I ate my lunch.
You heard shots before you ate your lunch.
Let's see. Yes, I believe I did.
Now, did you hear a shot either before or after lunch?
It was before lunch. It was before lunch.
You think it was before lunch you heard the shot?
I believe it was. Yes, sir.
While Doherty insisted that Oswald had nothing in his hands when he arrived at work, it turned out that this certitude was based on nothing but a glance.
Now, is that a very definite impression that you saw Oswald that morning when he came to work?
Well, it's like this. I'll try to explain it to you this way. You see, I was sitting on the wrapping table, and when he came in the door, I just caught him out of the corner of my eye.
Given that Fraser had eyes on Oswald for several minutes, the weight of evidence suggests he carried a package to work on the morning of November the 22nd. A far more contentious question is whether the package carried by Oswald was the same as the brown paper bag discovered on the 6th floor. According to both Randall and Fraser, the only two witnesses known to have seen the package, the answer was a definite no.
Now, was the length of the package any similar to the bag? Anywhere near similar?
Well, it wasn't that long. I mean, it was folded down at the top, as I told you. It definitely wasn't that long.
I told the FBI that as far as the length of the bag, I told them that was entirely too long.
Their main source of contention was that the package carried by Oswald was shorter than the brown paper bag. The bag was just long enough to store the rifle in its disassembled state, so if the package carried by Oswald was much shorter, then it could not have contained the rifle. Except Randall saw it briefly at a distance through a window, while Fraser never paid it much attention.
Did it look to you as if there was something heavy in the package?
Well, I'll be frank with you, I didn't pay much attention to the package.
In fact, the length of the package seemed about as certain to Fraser as his lack of attention to it.
I didn't pay much attention. I didn't pay too much attention. I didn't pay any attention to it. I didn't pay much attention to the package. I didn't look at the package very much. Like I say, I didn't pay that much attention to it. I didn't pay too much attention to how he carried the package at all.
And what the fuck did this guy pay attention
The tape and
to?
paper with which the brown paper bag had been constructed matched the tape and paper used to wrap books for shipping on the first floor of the book depository. Not only that, but a fingerprint and palm print matching that of Oswald were also found on the bag. In spite of all this, some authors refused to accept that the brown paper bag and the package carried by Oswald were one and the same. Instead, the argument tends to be that the bag was fabricated by authorities in an effort to frame Oswald. But you then have to square that against no curtain rods being found inside the book depository, Oswald already having curtains in his rented room in Dallas, him failing to obtain permission from his landlady to redecorate, him supposedly being in such urgent need of curtain rods that he just had to return to Irving on Thursday instead of waiting just one more day, him neglecting to mention anything about curtain rods to his wife and Ruth Payne upon his arrival, and that's despite the fact that Payne actually had some spare curtain rods in her garage.
Right, that's sus.
The same garage where Oswald stored his rifle.
How did you learn of the shooting of President Kennedy?
I was watching television and Ruth said someone had shot at the president.
What did you say?
It was hard for me to say anything. We both turned pale. I went to my room and cried.
Did you think immediately that your husband might have been involved?
No.
Did Mrs. Payne say anything about the possibility of your husband being involved?
No, but she only said that, by the way, they fired from the building in which Lee is working. My heart dropped. I then went to the garage to see whether the rifle was there, and I saw that the blanket was still there, and I said, thank God.
Did you look in the blanket to see if the rifle was there?
I didn't unroll the blanket. It
You
was
should
in
have
its
looked.
usual position, and it appeared to have something inside.
When did you learn that the rifle was not in the blanket?
When the police arrived and asked whether my husband had a rifle, and I said yes.
Then what happened?
They began to search the apartment. When they came to the garage and took the blanket, I thought, well, now they will find it. They opened the blanket, but there was no rifle there.
Around the time of the rifle's discovery on the 6th floor of the book depository, Captain William Fritz was appraised of Oswald's absence. Fritz immediately left the building and returned to police headquarters.
We were standing in the hallway when Captain Fritz walked in. He walked up to my colleagues and made the statement to them. go get a search warrant and pick up a man named Lee Oswald. And I asked the captain why he wanted him, and he said, well, he was employed down at the book depository, and he had not been present for a roll call of employees. And we said, Captain, we will save you a trip, because there he sits.
So I guess technically he was present? Some Riddler shit.
He was ever present.
After escaping the book depository, Oswald boarded a bus right about here. But the assassination ground traffic to a halt, so Oswald soon left the bus and hailed a cab. After returning to his house in Oak Cliff, a neighborhood in southwestern Dallas, Oswald changed his clothes, grabbed a gun, and left in a hurry.
78. 78. You are in the Oak Cliff area, are you not? Langston, you will be at large pretty much as it comes in.
Police patrolman J.D. Tippett encountered Oswald some 45 minutes after the shooting, a bit further south, right about here. As soon as Tippett stepped out of the vehicle, Oswald drew his gun and fired 4 shots in rapid succession.
Oh shit.
Hello, police operator? Go ahead, it says using it. Hello, we've had a shooting out here. Where is it at? Between Marcellus and Buckley. It's a police officer. Somebody shot him. What's this? 404 10th Street.
Oh shit.
78. It's in a police car. Notify one that the officer involved in the shooting, which is Officer J.D. Tippett, we believe, was pronounced DOA at Methodist 128. Well, any indication it has any connection with this other shooting? Well, the descriptions on the suspects are similar. It is possible.
Oswald was then caught sneaking into a nearby movie theater without purchasing a ticket.
I have information that a suspect just went in the Texas theater on West Jefferson.
That boy was
A large
sneaking
contingent of
into a
officers
flick.
descended upon the theater. They surrounded the building, switched on the lights, and approached the suspect. Flanked by officers, Oswald drew a gun, and a brief scuffle ensued. But this time he was quickly subdued, handcuffed, and taken to police headquarters back in downtown Dallas.
He was arrested for jaywalking.
Over the next 2 days, between his arrest and untimely death, Lee Harvey Oswald was interrogated by members of the Dallas Police, FBI, Secret Service, among others. None of it was recorded.
Did
Of course
you
it
have any
wasn't.
tape recorders?
No, sir. I don't have a tape recorder. We need one. If we had one at this time, we could have handled these conversations far better.
The Dallas Police Department.
You're at that fucking right,
No,
Ramirez.
sir. I have requested one several times, but so far, they haven't gotten me one.
So no one knows special interest to us.
Who thinks he's
is
Bono?
Oswald's alibi.
Bono, baby.
These people have given me a hearing without legal representation or anything. Did you shoot the president? I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir.
I didn't shoot anybody.
He said he did not shoot anybody.
Oswald vehemently denied any involvement in the assassination. Instead, he claimed to have eaten lunch with 2 co-workers on the first floor of the book depository. One of them was a black co-worker whose name Oswald could not recall. The other was James Jarman.
Were you with anybody when you were walking around on the first floor finishing your sandwich?
No, I wasn't. I was trying to get through so I could get out on the street.
Did you see Lee Oswald?
No, I didn't.
After his arrest, he stated to a police officer that he had had lunch with you. Did you have a lunch with him?
No, sir, I didn't.
But according to another interrogator, Oswald's claim was not to have eaten lunch with Jarman and this unnamed co-worker, but merely that he saw them pass through the lunchroom while he was eating.
Oswald stated that he had eaten lunch in the lunchroom at the Texas School Book Depository alone, but recalled possibly 2 black employees walking through the room during this period. He stated possibly one of these employees was called Junior, and the other was a short individual whose name he could not recall, but whom he would be able to recognize.
So, according to this version of events, Oswald's alibi was that he possibly saw 2 co-workers, one whose name he could not recall, enter and traverse the lunchroom, together or separately, during an unspecified period of time. Whether Oswald claimed to have eaten lunch with or in proximity of his colleagues, it makes no difference because neither alibi could be substantiated. Instead, James Jarman had last seen Oswald taking an elevator upstairs sometime between 11:30
they're just
and
lying.
12 o'clock. William Shelley and Eddie Piper had last seen Oswald roaming about the first floor around noon.
If any of these stories were true, either of them were like, yeah, I remember him being in the lunchroom.
Going up to eat lunch. Then there's the account of Charles Givens. You may recall that Givens is officially recognized as the last person inside the book depository known to have seen Oswald before the assassination. Their encounter was fixed at 11:55 and is supposed to have taken place on the 6th floor. But prior to relating this version of events, Givens had reportedly told the FBI that he saw Oswald on the 1st floor at 11:50, a statement which he later denied ever making. Either way, Oswald being on the 1st floor at noon
oh my
was
god,
absolutely
nice,
nothing
and
to
we're
prevent
lying.
him from being on the 6th half an hour later. Unless Carolyn Arnold is to be believed.
As Mrs. Arnold was standing in front of the building, she stated she thought she caught a fleeting glimpse of Lee Harvey Oswald standing in the hallway between the front door and the double doors leading to the warehouse located on the 1st floor. She could not be sure that this was Oswald, but she said she felt it was and believed the time to be a few minutes before 12:15 p.m.
So that would be about here. In a subsequent statement, Arnold claimed to have gone outside as late as 12:25, thereby pushing the time of her potential ground floor sighting of Oswald as close as 5 minutes before the shooting. Putting aside the fact that her observation was described as a fleeting glimpse and that she could not be certain of the man's identity,
a fleeting tittle.
will later deny it ever happened.
That is completely foreign to me. It
was a
would have
fleeting
forced me
tit.
to have been turning back around to the building when, in fact, I was trying to watch the parade. Why would I be looking back inside the building? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Instead, Arnold claimed that this encounter had actually taken place in the 2nd floor lunchroom.
I do not recall that Oswald was doing anything. I just recall that he was sitting there in one of the booth seats on the right-hand side of the room as you go in. He was alone, as usual, and appeared to be having lunch. I did not speak to him, but I recognized him clearly.
The problem with both of these accounts is that none of her colleagues reported anything remotely similar. Whether it was the 1st or 2nd floor, Oswald was apparently invisible to everyone but Arnold. Besides, it took Arnold 15 years to relate her revised version of events. Not ideal for such a time-sensitive issue. That being said, depending on what conspiracy theory you're willing to entertain, there are ways to interpret what Oswald told his interrogators so that it aligns with either one of Arnold's accounts. Take this one for instance.
Oswald stated he was present for work at the book depository on the morning of November the 22nd, and at noon went to lunch. He went to the 2nd floor to get a Coca-Cola and returned to the 1st floor to eat lunch. Then he went outside to watch the presidential parade.
This claim is interesting because in the early days of the assassination, it appeared to be supported by photographic evidence. But this figure was quickly identified as Billy Lovelady, a man who bore such a close resemblance to Oswald that when footage of Oswald first appeared on television, Lovelady's stepchildren thought it was him. Now, speaking only for myself here, really? Am I missing something here? Because they're not exactly doppelgangers, right? Anyway, in recent years, another such figure, this time with even fewer pixels to work with, has once again been the subject of debate. Because this much of a person can't be positively identified, some believe it, therefore, must be Oswald. On the other hand, Oswald explicitly denied watching the motorcade when he spoke with another interrogator, not to mention that his presence outside went completely unnoticed by all those who did watch the motorcade. Now, there's one final account of Oswald's supposed alibi that stands out from the rest. It stands out because it really skirts the line of self-incrimination.
When asked as to his whereabouts at the time of the shooting, Oswald stated that when lunchtime came and he didn't say which floor he was on, he said one of the black employees invited him to eat lunch with him, and he stated, "You go on down and send the elevator back up, and I will join you in a few minutes." Before he could finish whatever he was doing, he stated the commotion surrounding the assassination took place. And when he went downstairs, a policeman questioned him as to his identification, and his boss stated that he is one of our employees, whereupon the policeman had him step aside momentarily. Following this, he simply walked out the front door of the building.
If this is an accurate recollection of what Oswald said, he placed himself on a floor above the 2nd at the time of the shooting. While he neglected to mention which floor, he described a conversation between himself and an unnamed black co-worker, which sounds remarkably similar to the one described by Charles Givens.
Bro, what the
This
fuck?
would mean that Oswald,
That's what I'm
seemingly
saying.
by accident, placed himself on the 6th floor during the shooting. After that horribly confusing mishmash of stories, what have we learned? Well, Oswald appears to have contradicted himself by offering multiple alibis. It's also possible that what he said was misunderstood or otherwise misrepresented by the interrogation participants. As mentioned at the beginning of all this, we don't actually know what Oswald said. This is all based on second-hand accounts related days, weeks, or even months after the assassination. But the main takeaway has to be the lack of corroboration. With the exception of Carolyn Arnold, a highly unreliable witness, no one laid eyes on Oswald between roughly noon and the shooting. At least, no one inside the book depository. Among those who witnessed the sniper in the sniper's nest, Howard Brennan was the only one who thought he could identify the gunman. At least, that's what he stated initially. Within a few hours of the shooting, Brennan had become far less certain.
He become far. His opinion had become skewed.
Said, I don't know if I can do you any good or not, because I've seen the man that they have under arrest on television. And he said, I just don't know whether I can identify him positively or not. Because he said that the man on television was a bit disheveled, and his shirt was open or something like that. And he said, the man I saw in the book depository was not in that condition.
Brennan was then brought down to the basement of the police station to view a lineup of suspects. Among them was Oswald.
So maybe the second shooter got away fast while Oswald stayed behind,
said,
covered the track.
Is there anyone there that looks like the man in the book depository? He said, well, that second man from the left, who was Oswald, he looks like him. Then he repeated that the man he saw in the book depository was not disheveled.
So that's not ideal. While Brennan did pick Oswald from a lineup, that identification was far from certain. But if Brennan is to be believed, this uncertainty was not genuine, but merely an act intended to protect his family.
I believed at that time, and I still believe, the assassination was a communist activity. And I felt like there hadn't been more than one eyewitness. And if it got to be a known fact that I was an eyewitness, my family or I, either one, might not be safe.
Well, if you wouldn't have identified Oswald during the lineup, might he not have been released by the police?
No, I already knew they had the man for murder, and I knew he would not be released.
The murder of whom?
Of Officer J.D. Tippett.
Well, what happened in between to change your mind that you later decided to come forth and tell the FBI that you could identify him?
After Oswald was killed, I was relieved quite a bit that as far as pressure on myself of somebody not wanting me to identify anybody, there was no longer that immediate danger.
Mr. Brennan, could you tell us now whether you can or cannot positively identify the man you saw in the 6th floor window as the same man that you saw in the police station?
I could at that time. I could, with all sincerity, identify him as being the same man.
So, according to Brennan, within a few hours of the assassination, he'd become concerned that it was the product of a communist conspiracy. He feared that should he attempt to identify the gunman, he could become a target and thereby endanger his family.
Did you and your wife discuss any aspect of the assassination and you being present more or less at the scene of the assassination?
Yes, we discussed it. We talked. I talked of moving her and my grandson, who was living with us at that time, and my daughter, moving them out of town somewhere in secrecy. My wife seemed to think that a person can't get away wherever they go.
So when Brennan was brought down to the lineup later that evening, he feigned
somebody wants to
uncertainty
find and
to protect his family.
do you harm, they'll do it.
At least, so he claimed. I leave it up to you to decide whether to believe or disbelieve Brennan's story. On Sunday morning, November the 24th, Oswald was scheduled for transfer from the city to the county jail. Reporting from outside the police station, a local news correspondent couldn't help but to jinx the whole shebang.
Now, this is the armored truck that will carry Lee Harold Oswald from the basement here of Dallas Police Headquarters downtown to the Dallas County Sheriff's Office and the Dallas County Jail. Strict security precautions have been exercised from the very beginning and have been even increased this morning as fear arises and grows stronger that someone may attempt to take the life of the man accused of murdering the President of the United States.
He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot.
The doctors at Parkland Hospital said that the single shot could scarcely have done more damage to a body than that shot did to Lee Harvey Oswald. It penetrated his spleen, his pancreas, the aorta, the kidney, and the liver.
Oswald expired at 1:07 p.m. He died at 1:07 p.m. We have arrested the man. The man will be charged with murder.
Who is he?
The suspect's name is Jack Rubenstein, I believe. He goes by the name of Jack Ruby. That's all I have to say.
Some thoughts.
Throughout this video, we've encountered witnesses who not only contradicted each other, but also themselves. Central to many arguments of conspiracies that these contradictions represent attempts by the conspirators to conceal the truth. To give you an example, Charles Givens initially claimed to have seen Oswald on the first floor at 11:50. Then he denied ever saying that and claimed to have spoken with Oswald on the 6th floor at 11:55. Some authors have found this change a bit too convenient and suspected Givens was coerced to change his story by the conspirators. In support of that conclusion, we have this document in which Dallas Police Lieutenant Jack Revel said the following.
Lieutenant Revel stated that Givens had been previously handled by the Dallas Police Department on a marijuana charge, and he believes that Givens would change his story for money.
About 2 months later, Givens did precisely that. He changed his story. But let's have a think about this. According to this interpretation of events, the conspirators had free rein to dictate Givens' testimony. They could have told him what to say, or perhaps rewritten his testimony after the fact.
Oh yeah, Lando.
Recall that is precisely what Victoria Adams
My boy had a
claimed
marijuana
and Carolyn
charge.
Arnold implied earlier in the video, that someone had put words in their mouth by altering the written record.
Oh.
Okay, so wielding that near limitless power, what words did the conspirators choose to put in the mouth of Givens?
Lando Calrissian over here.
Invented a
Childish
conversation about lunch in elevators away from the sniper's nest more than half an hour before the
That boy thinks he's the Prowler.
I guess I saw Oswald sitting in the sniper's nest, or even I saw Oswald carrying a large package.
Oh my god,
before
and I
the sniper's nest
fucking died.
was a bit too on the nose. The same is of course true of every other witness in Dealey Plaza. Apart from the doubtful identification by Howard Brennan, no one could actually place Oswald in the sniper's nest at the time of the shooting. I really cannot stress this enough. It apparently did not occur to the conspirators to have at least one witness unambiguously identify Oswald as the assassin. Better yet, take a photograph. For all this talk of witness coercion and evidence tampering, that seems like a bit of an oversight. What I'm trying to illustrate is that it's surprisingly trivial to pluck a stray document here, an unfounded allegation there, and sprinkle in some thoughts about means and motive, and you'll end up with a conspiracy theory that, at least on the surface, sounds convincing. Whether it's organized crime, a foreign government, or domestic agency, there's enough material here to make a compelling case against countless groups and individuals, something upon which many authors, filmmakers, and others have capitalized to great success. I don't know if all of them are right or wrong. This video clearly doesn't cover enough ground for me to determine that. But to ascribe a conspiratorial motive to anything remotely suspicious seems irresponsibly black and white for a case so clouded by shades of grey. A person acting in a way that's unlawful, unethical, untruthful does not prove they colluded in a plot to assassinate the President of the United States. Such thrilling leaps of conspiracy make for entertaining stories, but that doesn't make them true. Remember Thomas Ollier? He was the journalist filming on the 6th floor during the initial search for the assassin. Decades later, Ollier began accusing officers of tampering with the evidence, staging photographs, and lying on oath. The veracity of those allegations aside, the fascinating thing about Ollier is that he never believed Kennedy fell victim to a conspiracy. Ollier had a refreshingly nuanced take on the assassination by recognizing that evidence of corruption is not the same as evidence of conspiracy. Sloppy police work neither began nor ended with the Kennedy assassination, and people lie for all sorts of reasons. Loyalty, embarrassment, fear, pride, attention, power, money. There's no shortage of motivations to choose from. Besides, what kind of clueless masterminds would allow a cameraman to casually film their supposed cover-up? Something I found myself doing a lot while making this video was attempting to view the assassination from the perspective of the alleged conspirators. You could, for instance, question the logic of placing an assassin in this specific window, a window in which he ran the risk of being caught red-handed by other workers inside the building, a window in which he could have easily been and actually was spotted by spectators in the approaching motorcade, a window from which his view was partially obstructed by a tree. You can also question the logic of using a sniper to shoot at a moving target in the first place, especially when that person had a tendency to stand still in very exposed public places. If Oswald acted alone and the assassination was a crime of opportunity, these less than ideal choices start to make a lot more sense. He found himself at the right place at the right time, had mere days to prepare, and used the only building to which he had access. But for a group of conspirators to handicap their own assassination plot requires a bit more ingenuity to explain. He was a patsy, he was supposed to get caught, there were multiple assassins, you know the drill. But there's so much of that in this case. So much had to go just right for a conspiracy and the subsequent cover-up to succeed. From the roundabout process by which Oswald was hired at the book depository to the selection of the motorcade route. From Oswald's narrow escape and subsequent arrest to him being given multiple chances to speak with the press. From the supposed tampering, suppression, and planting of evidence to dozens of expert witnesses being successfully fooled or coaxed to lie on their oath. Not only would a plan as complex and prolonged as this one have been difficult to predict with countless points of failure, but it seems, and excuse my language here, a bit overkill. Yes, Kennedy was the President of the United States, but he was not exactly difficult to access. He was rather famous for abandoning his Secret Service detail and wandering off into crowds. In fact, that's precisely what he did on multiple occasions during this very trip.
Now decided to shake hands with one or two more people, but this is the moment where the Secret Service has its point of tension. They say when the president stops moving, that's when we're concerned, because that is when the possibility of trouble comes to the forefront. This was one of those impromptu moments for which President Kennedy is so well known. So many times you have heard that the Secret Service men suddenly find themselves without the president, that suddenly he has left them and stepped into the crowd and decided to shake hands and give his personal greetings. You could say perhaps that this is more the norm now than the unexpected, because it has been done so many times.
As this news correspondent was alluding to just a few minutes before the actual shooting, all it takes is one person with a gun at point-blank range. Not unlike the shooting of Oswald. Think about that the next time you watch a documentary or read one of the thousands of books implicating members of the Secret Service, FBI, CIA, Dallas Police Department, politicians, lawyers, doctors, investigators, witnesses, and so forth. Think about how all these alleged co-conspirators did not have to be a part of any of this. Just one person in a crowd whose guilt is assured the moment they pull the trigger. By roping in this ensemble cast of characters, it inadvertently makes the conspirators seem clueless. I like to imagine a conference room, and up against the wall stands a board upon which they've mapped out the whole thing. All the people they need to manipulate, all the evidence they have to fabricate. The entire patchwork of needless risk-taking laid out bare before
all for nothing.
And they looked at that, and then looked at each other and went, "Yep, that's a solid plan." But even then, Even if we assume the conspirators didn't really think it through or, I don't know, made it up as they went along, that doesn't really jive with them not getting caught. Something that would have taken a lot of planning, skill, and ingenuity. So, I guess you somehow have to convince yourself that they were clueless enough to wing the crime of the century, yet clever enough to get away with it. And therefore, there was no conspiracy. No.
Fuck. God damn it. Which one did we watch? Hold on. Fuck.
The film was largely
Batman movie and shit. I fucking fully point the blame onto somebody else. Oh shit.
I know there was nothing. All three at the president. All three at the president, and we have them.
The report says that the first bullet likely missed the car completely, but that the second one did something very interesting. It first hit the president in the back and then exited his chest. It then entered through the governor's back, went through his rib, and then exited through his chest.
Whatever. What the fuck is this? Come on.
He is one of the most infamous serial killers in modern history. Jeffrey
Joseph Kennedy's appeasement policies when Joseph was ambassador to the court of St. James in 1938 to 1939. So, as a symbol of protest, Witt used an umbrella, a reference to the signature accessory of Neville Chamberlain, who promoted appeasement as Prime Minister of England. Witt also explains that he only opened the umbrella when he believed Kennedy could see it. And as odd as this may seem, throughout history, many people both in England and America have used umbrellas as a symbol of protest. Even the paranoid former President Nixon banned his aides from having umbrellas when he was vice president to Eisenhower for fear of having a visual link to the unpopular policy.
I'm not sure if we actually watched that one, so we could just quickly go over this one again.
Controversy for over 5 decades. Was there actually a conspiracy?
We'll end it off on this one, I guess.
I'm sure you are well versed in this one already.
I know the broad strokes. I haven't really gotten into details. I figure I'll read like a 1,600-page book when I'm like 60.
Yeah, you don't strike me as a detail guy.
I am a detail guy.
Let's get into it.
Okay.
On Friday, November 22nd, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was publicly assassinated while sitting in a car in a motorcade through Dallas, Texas. Kennedy was struck by 2 bullets, with the second being a fatal headshot. Governor John B. Connally Jr., who was in the car with JFK, was also hit in the shooting, but survived. Officially, there were 3 bullets fired by the gunman. The horrifying act was caught on film by a man named Abraham Zapruder with his 8mm film camera. The film, now referred to as the Zapruder film, would later go on to be integral into the investigation, as it allowed for frame-by-frame analysis. The shooting occurred from the 6th-floor window at the southeast corner of the Texas School Book Depository, a building along the motorcade route. The official ruling was that the gunman was a man named Lee Harvey Oswald. 2 days after the assassination, Oswald was killed by a man named Jack Ruby at the Dallas Police Department. In fact, that shooting was broadcast on live television. I gotta say, kudos to that camera guy for holding that shot. Because
Yeah,
if a gunshot went off, all bets are off.
I would throw the camera at the ceiling, scream, and just run.
Oh, I wouldn't think about anything.
I'd go,
Returning to JFK, there are many who have criticized the motorcade route, believing it to have an unusual amount of turns, which would have caused the motorcade to have to slow down. The route was chosen by Secret Service agents Winston G. Lawson and Forrest V. Soles.
Winston.
Secret
My boy
Service
sounds
then sent in
sus.
vans to check out the route, noted that there were over 20,000 windows overlooking.
Sounds like
the route,
Nero's actual
and since they
government.
didn't have enough
Winston.
lamps to station at every window, they opted to inspect none of the windows along the
This man Winston.
not a good alternative.
There's far too many.
You good, Winston?
You know, just call it a day. Well,
We don't have enough guys to look at all these windows. What if we just don't do shit?
What if we just don't do squat?
But sir, the president's going to be coming to town. He won't care.
What are they going to do? Shoot him?
So what are they gonna do? Shoot him?
After the assassination, newly sworn-in president and created a commission to investigate the circumstances of the JFK assassination and subsequent killing of Lee Harvey Oswald. This commission
Lee
was
Jarvey
led by Supreme
Jarville.
Court Justice Earl Warren and staffed with other esteemed officials. And while the official findings of the commission believes there was only one shooter, it does have one thing in common with numerous conspiracy theories, that the shooter was Lee Harvey Oswald. And with that, let's get into the main theory, which is the official ruling by the Warren Commission that Lee Harvey Oswald assassinated JFK alone, with no conspiracy involved. Let's get into the background of Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald had been in Russia in 1959 and had tried to renounce his American citizenship. Oswald had a history of violence from a young age. He once
Oh
chased a
yeah, he
brother
tried to
with a knife,
renounce his
and while in the
citizenship.
Marine Corps, where he spent 3 years, he became qualified as a sharpshooter with the M1 rifle. Oswald, a Dallas resident, was actually under active surveillance by
My
the
boy thinks he
FBI
could just,
office in
you know,
Dallas.
renounce
However,
the United States. You hear this guy now?
FBI, strangely, did not inform the Secret Service about
You hear this
Oswald.
guy?
This is especially shocking, considering the fact that Oswald was employed at the Texas School Book Depository, a location right along the motorcade route, from where Oswald would eventually fire the fatal shots from the southeast corner of the 6th floor window. However, to be fair, the Secret Service did not inform the local FBI office of the motorcade route either. So, this was a mishandling on both of their parts. They didn't clue the Secret Service in, hey, there's kind of like a guy who's kind of crazy, hates America, sharpshooter, right along, you know, where you're gonna be. But then again, I guess they wouldn't know that because the Secret Service didn't let the FBI know of the motorcade route, which would be the first thing, or one of the first things I would do.
Communication is important in all fields, right?
I mean, you'd think that.
No, I don't think so.
In thinking that these were obvious steps that should have been taken.
I think if you were in one of those departments, you know, Jack Kennedy would probably still be alive today.
Wow, that's high praise. So you think I could have saved the president?
You know what?
So you think
I'll
I could
deal
have
with
saved the
it. I
president?
think you could have saved him.
Here are direct quotes from the Warren Commission in regards to evidence proving Oswald was the shooter. Quote, the Mannlicher Carcano 6.5mm Italian rifle, from which the shots were fired, was owned by and in the possession of Oswald. And
Of
this was
Joswald.
determined due to the fact that there was a nearly whole bullet recovered from Governor Connolly's stretcher, and 2 bullet fragments in the car that matched that rifle. Quote, to the exclusion of all other weapons, end quote. The rifle was found hidden near the 6th floor window, as well as 3 bullet cartridges matching the 3 shots heard. Continuing with the commission's evidence, quote, Oswald had attempted to kill Major General Edwin A. Walker on April 10, 1963, thereby demonstrating his disposition to take human life, end quote. So this isn't his first big hit job.
No.
The first one he missed, imagine he trained like a madman so that he wouldn't miss again.
He's got to be good though, right?
I mean, he hit 2 for 3.
That he trained like a madman.
Oswald unquestionably also killed Dallas policeman J.D. Tippit with a revolver approximately 45 minutes after the assassination. This is backed up by eyewitness testimony. And also
Damn, he revolvered to that. He Red Dead revolvered him.
At the time of his arrest.
That's crazy.
His name is Jizzwald.
You hear this kid Gismondo'd? Remember when Nero was getting Gismondo'd?
I mean, you killed the president.
Like a Jizzosaurus.
It's like
was getting Gismondo'd.
have a little snack afterward.
Yeah, like if you go eat
Nigga
Chipotle
Jizzurkus.
might as well have a muffin after.
Might as well have a
You
muffin.
You're
Jizzurkus.
already doing damage to
It's
your
a
body.
Jizzurkus. You hear this?
Finish the job.
You think
Jigamalo?
he uttered the phrase, might as
This
well?
nigga's a Jizzurker.
With all that in mind, it seems pretty clear that Oswald was the shooter. However, many have wondered if Oswald acted alone. Unfortunately, due to the fact that
He
Oswald
jacked
was killed
it
by
alone.
Jack Ruby, we may never know for sure. And while it should be noted that the Warren Commission found no evidence that
They
Ruby
call
or Oswald
him
were
Jack
part of the
Off
conspiracy to
Sparrow.
kill the president,
Captain
it's
Jack
natural
Off
to
Sparrow.
wonder if Ruby may have killed Oswald to keep him quiet. The Warren Commission also found, quote, no evidence that Oswald was involved with any person or group in a conspiracy to assassinate the president, end quote. The Warren Commission was firm in their belief that Oswald was the sole shooter. To examine that, let's take a closer look at the scene of the crime, and more specifically, the bullets fired. The Warren Commission believes that there were only 3 bullets fired, with these 3 subsequent results. The first bullet missed. The second bullet hit JFK in the neck and also hit Governor Connolly. And the third bullet was the fatal headshot. The second bullet in particular is the most controversial in that the Warren Commission posits it hit both JFK and Connolly. This idea is referred to as the magic bullet theory. The commission theorizes that from the 6th floor window, the bullet entered through the back of JFK's neck, exiting downward, then entered through Connolly's right side of his back, exited below his right nipple, then entered and exited through Connolly's right wrist, and finally ended in Connolly's left thigh. They even concluded that the nearly full bullet found in Connolly's stretcher was this second bullet. However, this magic bullet, as it's often referred to online, has been met with a fair share of skepticism. The main point of contention is that many believe the trajectory from the 6th floor window is impossible. Yet, computer renderings of the event have shown that it is indeed possible when you consider that Governor Connolly was sitting on a lower seat than Kennedy, and also when you consider their body positions. That being said, I do find it hard to believe that this so-called magic bullet would be nearly intact after
The
traveling
magic
through 2
chingazo.
That first one went through JFK's
neck.
Oh,
As the front,
Christ.
through Connolly's back right here, under his nipple, came out there. It went through his right wrist that was sitting like this, went through that, landed in his left eye, and stayed there.
That's a lot for one bullet.
And a lot for one bullet to stay intact.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the Warren Commission claims the magic bullet theory is not integral to their theory that Oswald was the sole shooter. However, when you examine the frames of the Zapruder film, it shows that there was not enough time for Oswald to fire 2 shots within the time span that JFK and Connolly were first hit. Basically, if the magic bullet theory isn't true, then there had to be 2 shooters. Do you follow that?
Yeah.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah. So I'm just going to guess it's a single bullet then.
I mean, now let me disprove the single bullet theory.
Okay, I'll let you do that.
Okay. Taking that into consideration, let's attempt to disprove the magic bullet theory.
The magic
Here's a quote
chingazo
from
theory.
Governor Connolly in a 1966 interview with Life magazine. Quote, "There is my absolute knowledge, and Nellie's too, that one bullet caused the president's first wound, and that an entirely separate shot struck me." End quote. As stated before, if this is true, then it had to be 2 shooters. Let's also look at the testimony of James T. Tague, a spectator along the motorcade route, who claims that a stray bullet hit the sidewalk near him, and a fragment of that bullet struck him in the cheek. There was, in fact,
Right in the
Warren
cheek.
Commission report, quote, could have removed
My boy,
because
oh
Tague
shit.
claimed of a
My
bullet,
boy,
end quote. This
my boy got
potential
bitch
stray
slapped by a
is
bullet.
noteworthy because Tague claims this stray bullet was actually the second shot and not the first shot, which is particularly damning to the magic bullet theory, which posits that the magic bullet was the second shot and the missed bullet was the first. So either Tague misinterpreted the situation, or there were more than 3 bullets fired. And if you recall, there was only 3 cartridges found by Oswald's window in the Texas School Book Depository, so that would suggest more than one shooter. Furthermore, in the 1970s, a new acoustic research technique was used to analyze the audio of the shooting, which found 6 points in the audio that could contain echo patterns similar to those of gunfire.
Echo
Further
chingazos.
suggests that there may have been more than one shooter. There's even supposedly footage of the JFK assassination from an angle different than the Zapruder film. This alternate footage reportedly shows a now infamous grassy knoll in the background. People who have seen the footage claim to see anything from puffs of gun smoke or a second shooter located on the grassy knoll. However, this footage has supposedly gone missing.
Of course it has.
I know people want to figure this out and that people wanted justice, but this just seems like a lot of work.
Have I not made great points here, though?
Yeah, you have, but it's like, I don't know, it's not going to bring him back to life. It's not going to put his head back together.
Well, wouldn't you like to know what happened? Do you really want to go on the rest of your life thinking it was the sole actions of a madman and not a larger part of a conspiracy or a bigger thing?
I'm content with that, I guess.
Well, then
You know, here's the thing. If it was a conspiracy, if it was a secretive group operating, they did a great job. I
A
commend them.
conspiracy.
No, this isn't.
Hey, you fooled us. Let's move on, you know?
Cynthia Nix Jackson, the granddaughter of the person who took the film, sued the US government for $10 million in 2015 for the return of the film. Apparently, this film has not been seen since the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1978. This committee, by the way, was formed in 1976 to conduct an investigation into the assassinations of JFK and Martin Luther King Jr. Why it was formed is of particular interest. The House Select Committee on Assassinations was formed after a Senate committee confirmed that the CIA had purposefully withheld information from the Warren Commission investigation.
Of course they did.
The information withheld involved plots to assassinate Fidel Castro.
Mr.
The House
Fidel.
Select Committee on Assassinations concluded in 1978 that scientific acoustical evidence established a high probability that 2 gunmen had shot at JFK. Also, here's a direct quote
2
from the committee's
vagabonds.
findings. Quote, "The committee believes, on the basis of the evidence available,
2 stupid
that
dogs.
President John F. Kennedy was probably
2
assassinated as
vagabonds.
a result of a conspiracy. The committee is
2
unable
clerics.
to identify the other gunmen or the extent of the conspiracy." End quote.
That's the government concluding that, not me.
Yeah, again, I'm good with that.
You seem just so. I don't know. I don't know what.
I trust whatever anybody says about it. If the CIA
It's the trust,
is
bro,
giving
trust.
information that they don't want us
Just
to know,
trust, bro.
great,
That's
you know?
that's a major bomb just being dropped right there, and you seem indifferent to it. How is that not like holy shit? How are the gears not turning in your brain now? Going, what else are they withholding? Like,
JFK made a ton of enemies. That guy was shady as hell.
so I said, oh my god, what is this gonna turn into a character?
I'm just
assassination
saying, if
from
you
him?
go around doing shady shit, you know, it's not. You know,
I mean, I think every president has had to do some shady shit.
oh, for sure.
When considering the conclusions of this committee, the acoustic evidence, the testimonies of Connolly and Tague, and the shaky premise of
Like,
the
I'm pretty
magic
sure that's what it
bullet
means to be
theory,
president.
there is
You have to
evidence
fucking
to
deal with all the
suggest
shitty
multiple
shit.
shooters. It seems quite likely that there is more to this story than Lee Harvey Oswald killing the president with no clear motive. That being said, let's break out the tinfoil hat and get into some conspiracy theories. And trust me, you're gonna want to stick around for the last one. Is that Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson had JFK assassinated for political gain and power. Before Kennedy was elected, LBJ had attempted to take the Democratic nomination from JFK at the 1960 Democratic Convention in Los Angeles. According to the book The Death of a President, LBJ asked the president to continue doing part of his old job as Texas senator, which basically meant LBJ was bored and emasculated by the showy office of vice president, as opposed to the actual power he had held while being the majority leader of the Senate. There were also rumors that LBJ might be dropped from the re-election ticket the following year. LBJ LBJ and JFK also apparently had words the day before the assassination. LBJ also played a big part in Kennedy going to Dallas in the first place. LBJ no longer had political control of Texas, which was an important swing state necessary for JFK's re-election. As a result,
Of course he did.
JFK reluctantly went to Dallas to try and solve the Texas political crisis. Texas was LBJ's home turf, and JFK felt LBJ should have had it handled. LBJ's right-hand man had actually been warned by a high-profile Texas lawyer named Byron Skelton that the political climate in Dallas was not safe and that he feared for the president's safety. But the president
Not safe. Damn.
This information was also received by other officials close to JFK,
Of course.
including JFK's brother, Robert Kennedy. One incident that proponents of this LBJ theory point to involves a woman named Madeline Brown, who claimed to have an affair with LBJ. Brown claimed that she attended a party with LBJ, Richard Nixon, and J.
Nixon.
the night before JFK's assassination.
Oh.
She claimed that LBJ had whispered into her ear, quote, "After tomorrow, those Kennedys will never embarrass me again. That's no threat."
Jesus.
My boy was getting some pone and spilling the beaneroonies.
I guess it's a character witness, so you don't really know. I get the vibe that LBJ, he was president.
Yeah, I get the
so
Oppenheimer
obviously
feeling.
He's an intelligent man, but he also just seems like kind of an idiot. He's always walking around with his pants off.
Yeah, that's true.
He doesn't seem like the mastermind type.
What stock do you put into this admission from her, or this claim by her? I'm curious.
If I'm LBJ, and I've got my illicit arm charm out for the evening with Tricky Dick next to me and old
The
J.
Tricky
Edgar
Dick.
Tricky Dick.
Nigga,
I'm
what?
not gonna whisper
Tricky
into her
Dick
ear,
is crazy,
"The
cuz.
president's gonna die tomorrow."
I can't get over
Who
you
would do
calling
that?
Richard Nixon Tricky Dick.
That's what
Man said, "Hey, Tricky Dick."
Oh, Tricky Dick.
Tricky Dick.
Tricky Dick.
Yeah, I will say the quote.
Tricky cock.
Yeah.
Why would someone say it so specifically when they're trying to pull off one of the biggest coups in history?
LBJ was on the Texas trip the night before the assassination.
Nigga, Austin's
where his
being gay
movements
with
were
malicious
heavily
intent.
documented.
Yeah, it's good.
Therefore, it's not possible that this exchange with Madeline Brown happened. Furthermore, while there is evidence that LBJ wasn't happiest as VP, there is nothing to support the theory that he had JFK assassinated. He even helped form the Warren Commission.
LBJ seems like a cool guy.
Well, you just said he seems like a dumbass.
Yeah, he does, but he's like a bro.
You could knock a cold one back with him.
Yeah,
Play
just
some
because
pong.
you're a bit of a
He's probably a meathead back in the day.
a
right?
meathead.
There
He's a
you go.
meathead.
He's a meathead.
He's a jock.
Yeah, he's a jock.
He's a meathead.
I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
I don't think any vice president has accomplished anything throughout history.
In that respect, I don't think he had the moxie to pull off this.
No.
The second theory is that the Russians were behind President Kennedy's assassination. Obviously, there was tension between the two nations with the Cold War.
Oh yeah, soy
Harvey
boy.
Oswald had tried to defect to the Soviet Union before, and some theorize that he could have been acting as a KGB agent. Oswald was also inexplicably at the Russian embassy in Mexico City a few weeks before the Kennedy assassination. Though, it's worth mentioning that Oswald would not be a smart option for the Russians to use, since he would immediately cast suspicions on Russia due to his well-known Russian ties.
Unless they're doing a double bluff.
I wouldn't do that. I mean,
Huh?
think
Huh?
about,
What about
this.
that?
Well, I mean, look at it logically.
Why would we hire Oswald?
Why would we hire Oswald when he clearly likes us? From a logic perspective, we're in this Cold War with them for about 10 years now. There's always the threat of nuclear war. Why the fuck would they even chance hiring a person with Russian ties to assassinate the president when they know the finger would be pointed at them? And then, like, if someone were to find out that Russia assassinated our president, that's immediate
That's
World
war,
War III.
baby.
Yeah, we all die.
Yeah.
That's not Vladimir Putin fucking whispering sweet nothings in Trump's ear. That's him blowing someone's head off.
Right.
The third theory is that the mob assassinated Kennedy. 3 different mob groups separately claimed that they were responsible for JFK's assassination: the Chicago mob, the Miami mob, and the New Orleans mob. As Attorney General, Robert Kennedy had made moves against organized crime, possibly angering them. Jack
Attorney
Ruby,
General,
the man who
damn.
killed Harvey Oswald, was a Dallas nightclub owner who some theorize had mafia connections. Some even believe that the mob was working in collusion with the CIA to carry out the Kennedy hit. In 2015, an imprisoned former mafia hitman named James Files claimed to have been the second shooter in the assassination, saying he was part of a plot in collaboration between the mafia and the CIA. However, there's no evidence supporting this. Perhaps the most compelling aspect to the mob and CIA theory comes from JFK's supposed ties to Sam Giancana, the head of the Chicago
Sam
syndicate at the
Giancana.
time. JFK's father, Joseph Kennedy, supposedly worked with Sam Giancana in the bootlegging industry during the Prohibition. There have also been rumors that Giancana and the mob helped JFK win the 1960 election in the first place. JFK and Giancana also reportedly shared a mistress at different times, named Judith Campbell Exner. In fact, in 1975, Giancana was supposed to testify to a Senate committee about his role in a CIA assassination plot, when he himself was assassinated.
Oh shit.
It makes you wonder if someone was trying to keep him quiet.
But why would he claim it then? Why would he even make that up? Do you think maybe he was just trying to up his cred, like in prison? Like, yeah, I whacked Kennedy.
Yeah, this happens a lot. People always just claiming.
Yeah, but I feel like if you're gonna claim something, maybe claim you killed some dude carrying groceries down the alleyway. Don't just claim I killed JFK.
Right.
I feel like nothing good could come of that.
Everyone just kind of rolls their eyes at him.
How could I make my prison sentence a life sentence? Huh.
I killed God.
Speaking of the CIA, let's move to our fourth and final theory, that the CIA was ultimately behind the assassination of JFK. Ellen Dulles, the former head of the CIA, was actually on the Warren Commission, and as mentioned before, the CIA withheld information from that commission. The CIA now refers to this as a, quote, benign cover-up, end quote. There
A
are plenty of
benign
theories out there
cover-up.
for possible motives for the CIA assassinating Kennedy. Some feel that JFK may have found out that the CIA had a plot to assassinate Fidel Castro, and the CIA felt threatened that Kennedy might have a different agenda or even disband them, so they plotted to assassinate him.
Yeah, possible. I'm not gonna say this one's out of the realm of
I
possibility.
could see
There were a
that.
bunch of attempts on Castro's life, right?
Oh yeah.
Exploding cigar.
There was also the Bay of
They said the exploding cigar.
we all know how that went.
Forensic historian Patrick Nolan wrote a book entitled CIA Rogues and the Killing of the Kennedys, in which he theorizes that 4 high-level agents not only planned the shooting, but 3 of them fired 4 shots during the assassination. People also feel that the CIA could have picked Oswald to carry out the hit, as he was a known communist and Russian sympathizer. Another possible CIA motive was that after the failed Bay of Pigs invasion into Cuba, the CIA underwent personnel changes at the hand of Kennedy, which may have upset them.
Blaming something on the CIA is essentially pointing a finger at a shadow. There's nothing we know about them, and there's nothing we ever will know about them.
We won't.
So
I think maybe that's why I'm so comfortable with just never knowing on this and hanging it up, because there's just unknowables. There's people who are good at covering their tracks. The CIA is very, very good at operating in total secrecy. So
yeah, the CIA doesn't even leave tracks. They're the boogeyman of the world.
they probably control more of our daily life than we'd ever know. They're pulling strings.
I mean, it's a Central Intelligence
It's pointless
Agency.
to
What do you
point the finger
mean,
at them,
dude?
is what I'm saying.
They're obviously gonna be
You
good
can
at
say it's
covering
anybody
their
at that point. It doesn't
tracks.
matter. You're making a baseless conclusion. You could say it's fucking Lime Cat or something.
Lime Cat?
You know, the cat that has a lime cut in half and he wears it as a helmet? He's the person who pulled the trigger.
Lime Cat.
Internet photo?
Yeah, yeah, Lime Cat killed JFK. That's what I'm saying. It's just as
Do
dumb.
people call that Lime Cat?
Yeah, it's Lime Cat.
Lime,
Lime
Lime
Cat.
Cat.
I'm pretty sure it's Lime Cat.
Oh.
I've never heard someone refer to this cat so casually.
Also during that Bay of Pigs invasion, Kennedy refused to offer additional U.S. military support, despite the CIA offering an umbrella of air protection. The explicit use of the word umbrella unlocks one controversial wrinkle to this CIA theory.
A wrinkle
This
in
which
time.
is popular in conspiracy circles.
A wrinkle in your
Harry
underwear.
Oswald acted with a potential CIA operative referred to as the Umbrella Man.
Whoa! I love names like that.
Oh, it's not just a name. It is very practical.
The Umbrella Man.
There's no creative input into this name. It's all practical.
I fucking love that.
Oh, man.
The Umbrella
I
Man.
love it too. I can't wait to tell you.
Whoa, baby!
Holy
The Umbrella Man.
Don't call me.
No, you ain't heard about the
This
Umbrella Man?
film and other photos taken at the time of the shooting, you can see one lone man holding an opened umbrella above his head. At a glance, this may seem fairly innocuous, but there are 2 things that make it unusual. The first is that it wasn't raining, and despite it raining in Dallas the night before, nobody in the crowd, as far as pictures and media can tell, had an umbrella. The second, and more dubious occurrence,
Oh,
is the fact
dubious.
that Kennedy is struck by the first bullet at the moment his car passes in front of this umbrella man. Also in that moment, some believe that the umbrella man appears to lift his umbrella a foot or so. Both of these things in conjunction have led some to believe that the umbrella was a signal to another gunman, or that the umbrella itself was a spy-like weapon that could fire darts, perhaps explaining the slight hole in JFK's neck.
He's like Oswald Cobblepot.
Yeah, he's like James Bond, and this is a new weapon that M
He's
is-
like the Penguin.
Or the Penguin.
The Penguin had a gunbrella. I do want to ask though, the term umbrella in the previous quote is what links that to why?
So
is that just an innocuous link there? Was that a segue from you, or are people like that proves that this
it's
is
a segue and it's somewhat proof in conspiracy circles.
Okay, well that's a grasp.
It's the CIA said they were going to offer an umbrella of air protection, and Kennedy
An
said,
umbrella of air protection.
And,
Okay, well,
and then
so that's very tenuous.
And then they're like, all right, we're gonna kill you with an umbrella.
As outlandish as this may seem, a Department of Defense weapons developer named Charles Sensney incredibly testified to the Senate Intelligence Committee that a form of this wacky umbrella weapon exists because he designed it. Sensney described an umbrella-like weapon that could silently fire darts. One book author named Jim Mars also claimed that these darts were fired through the umbrella's webbing when opened. Furthermore, there are pictures that show the umbrella closed before and after the assassination, but during the assassination, the umbrella was clearly open as Kennedy passed the umbrella man.
The umbrella man.
So
yeah, I don't think you have to sell me anymore on this, Ryan. I was all in once you mentioned the words umbrella man.
What do you think about
The
the umbrella?
the umbrella man.
The webbing of the
Great,
umbrella?
I'm on board.
That's pretty fucking cool.
The chingazo
You could
man.
convince me of anything in the world if you just use the words umbrella man. If you say Amelia Earhart, her plane was attacked by an umbrella man and he took her to space, I'd say that sounds about right.
Also suspicious is the fact that after the shooting, while other spectators fled the scene, this umbrella man, along with another man, sat down next to each other on the curb, seemingly undisturbed. However, a possible explanation came from the purported umbrella man himself. This man was a man named Louis Stephen Witt, who came forward to the Senate committee.
Yeah, but even still, if you see everybody frantically running, you're not just gonna stay there.
That the umbrella was a symbol of protest to JFK's father, Joseph Kennedy. Witt was not a fan of Joseph Kennedy's appeasement policies when Joseph was ambassador to the court of St. James in 1938 to 1939. So, as a symbol of protest, Witt used an umbrella, a reference to the signature accessory of Neville Chamberlain, who promoted appeasement as Prime Minister of England. Witt also explains that he only opened the umbrella when he believed Kennedy could see it. And as odd as this may seem, throughout history, many people both in England and America have used umbrellas as a symbol of protest. Even the paranoid former President Nixon banned his aides from having umbrellas when he was vice president to Eisenhower for fear of having a visual link to the unpopular policy of appeasement.
I'm fed up with this guy. Also, he shows up to court and says, "No, this is the umbrella."
Appeasement.
I couldn't possibly have
I know.
two umbrellas.
By the way, no follow-up from this testimony. None of them searching his house. Nobody saying and confirming that this is the umbrella man. It's just a guy saying this flimsy little excuse about some history lesson that he probably, I guess he couldn't have Googled it, but he could have went to the local history professor.
Absolutely shameful.
I find it very weak.
The supposed
I
umbrella
don't, because back then it was kind of harder to fabricate stories because people didn't have the internet.
Kennedy being assassinated, thus explaining his apparent state of calm or shock as he described it, as he sat on the curb
Appeasement.
after the shooting. But some have claimed this isn't proven in the footage. Perhaps Louis Stephen Witt is in fact the umbrella man, and this is all a misunderstanding. Or perhaps
Man really
Witt is
appeased
puppet
Adolf
that
Hitler. That's
sees
crazy.
his tracks. Nobody can say definitively which is true.
Fucking umbrella man.
I just
Oh,
can't
the
believe
umbrella
that that's his
man.
excuse. I couldn't see it. I didn't see it. I heard the gunshots. I saw everyone running.
The
and I thought, oh, it was
umbrella
part of the
blocked my
parade.
view.
It was a very nice parade. I didn't see the
Yo,
part
he
where
said
the
the
president
beef
got shot
blocked
in the
his
head.
view. Oh.
In the end, People continue to speculate on what truly happened in
Why
Dallas
the
that
beef
day.
block you?
A 2003 ABC News poll conducted 40 years after JFK's assassinations found that approximately 70% of Americans believed there was some sort of plot
KFJ.
behind the killings. Only 32% accepted the Warren Commission's findings, and 51% believed there was a second gunman involved. In 1973, LBJ told The Atlantic, quote, "I never believed that Oswald acted alone, although I can accept that he pulled the trigger," end quote. I just can't believe that one single douchebag could assassinate a president.
Yeah, he's not a very good
Oh my god, what the fuck is wrong with this
He doesn't even have a scary
game?
outfit.
No, he's got like a nice, smart sweater. And he's got like
Nice
trendy
smart
hair.
sweater.
Trendy
It's like perfectly greasy.
Side note, what do you think Lee Harvey Oswald
Ran
was
out
like?
of fucking
Good,
bullets.
good pomade.
Some gentleman's pomade right there.
Well, I guess we'll never know what happened in Dallas that day.
Oh my god.
Did Lee Harvey Oswald act alone? Was there other gunmen? Perhaps the mysterious Umbrella Man? And if there were, who were they working for? The horrific assassination of John F. Kennedy will remain unsolved.
Damn. I don't remember what video that was. Alright, chat. What the fuck was this one about?
In his system.
Sounds like he was drunk.
Sure sounds like he was drunk.
French authorities announced Paul's blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit, implying it was drunk driving,
Oh
not
my
an intended
god,
assassination
fuck,
that
god
caused the crash.
damn it,
Conspiracy
nigger.
theory, after the driver points not to malice, but dollars a year. This comes from France or the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. The most prevalent theory, 175 theories. It's time to check out some of the most prevalent theories surrounding the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. Our first theory is that the driver, Henry Paul, was paid by security forces in either France or the UK to intentionally crash the car. This comes from reports that Paul seemingly had much more money than his salary could explain. Despite making only $35,000 a year, Paul had nearly $250,000 in his bank account and a significant amount of cash on him. Control of the vehicle while being chased by paparazzi, reportedly driving 70 miles per hour in a 30 mile per hour zone. The Mercedes slammed into a pillar in the center of the highway. Diana, Al-Fayed, and Paul were not wearing seatbelts.
And I died.
Paul and Al-Fayed were pronounced dead at the scene, while Diana and Reese Jones were taken to the hospital. Many paparazzi who had been chasing the car chose to photograph the wreckage instead of trying to help the victims. Reese Jones survived, but Diana's injuries proved to be more severe. The princess was suffering from a concussion, a broken arm, a cut thigh, and massive chest injuries.
Damn.
Doctors operated for 2 hours, but could not get the princess's heart to beat properly. Princess Diana passed away from internal bleeding the morning of August 31st.
Oh, my birthday,
She was
damn.
36 years old and survived by her 2 sons, Prince William, age 15, and Prince Harry, age 12. On September 6th, 1997, 2.5 billion people, that's billion with a B, tuned in to watch the funeral procession for Princess Diana, one of the largest.
It's amazing how
non-sporting
those people
television
like pretend to
audiences
care,
ever.
but then when the moment comes
In
where
the
like
wake
this
of her
person is
death,
like dying
as can
and you could
happen
have actually
when the
tried to
world
help them, you
struggles
sit there
to
and
come
take
to
pictures
terms with
instead.
an unspeakable tragedy.
Oh, yeah.
Conspiracy theories began to gain steam, largely thanks to their publication in the Daily Express. Rumors suggesting someone intentionally
Alright,
killed
well,
the princess swirled.
that's it for
In
now,
response,
chat.
The Metropolitan
Peace.
Police